Been a big year for the climate. The Global Climate Action Summit brought worldwide attention on cities around the world making a difference in climate solutions, and the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report and the fourth National Climate Assessment, as well as the horrible fires, reminded us of the urgency of the problem. Meanwhile, Berkeley has never wavered in our commitments. We've maintained a leadership role by implementing innovative policies and by organizing regional, state, and national coalitions to accelerate action. It's clear the situation is more urgent than ever. In order to address the magnitude of the problem we're facing, we're moving beyond programs that focus only on efficiency with programs that transform our community to clean energy instead of fossil fuels. So most importantly, we want to reduce our emissions in a way that improves the quality of our lives and the vibrancy of our community. We're planning for this transition within a resilience framework that helps address social challenges such as improving racial equity, helping communities adapt to risks we experience with a warmer climate, like smoke from fires, heat, and rising sea levels, while building strong connections and community partnerships. Unlike efficiency programs that often save money, this transition to clean energy will require strategic investments in our buildings, our infrastructure, and our people. So as an overview for the presentation, first I'll provide a context of our climate action work, including the commitments and the policy framework. Next, we'll review the emissions inventory. We'll discuss our pathway to clean energy future and highlight a few programs and planning efforts in the report. And then we'll hear from our two partners who we've invited, both UC Berkeley and the Berkeley Lab, to discuss their emissions reductions programs and policies. So the Climate Action Plan, the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan, and the Resilience Strategy remain the pillars that guide our work. The challenges of reducing emissions and addressing hazards from a changing climate are interconnected, and so too are the solutions. We look for multi-benefit solutions that address multiple challenges. For example, insulating our homes can save energy as well as making our buildings more resilient by making people more comfortable in the face of extreme weather. In addition to the CAP goal of reducing our emissions by 80% by 2050, Council has clearly prioritized the urgency of the problem with additional goals, including 100% renewable electricity, zero net carbon, as well as a referral to the Energy Commission on Berkeley becoming fossil-free. In response to these bold policies, we're doing strategic planning efforts to see how quickly we can transition away from fossil fuels, namely gasoline and natural gas, so that we can propose a suite of measurable and achievable multi-benefit programs that produce the highest benefits for our community. So in order to assure that our solutions build resilience for our community, yeah, thank you. Build resilience for our community, we're using a planning framework that puts equity, adaptation, and strong community partnerships at the forefront. That way, we choose emissions reduction strategies that build vibrant and connected communities and provide equitable access to all. For example, we don't only want to focus reducing transportation emissions from people who can afford electric vehicles. We want to be sure that everybody has clean and safe mobility choices for a better community. So let's take a look at the snapshot of Berkeley's emissions in 2016. That's the most current year that we have PG&E's energy use data for. Each year, we calculate these community-wide emissions and break them down by sector. So as you can see, the biggest sector in orange is transportation, which represents 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Most of that, 70%, is from gasoline-powered cars. The next largest portion of our emissions comes from buildings. The yellow, blue, and green wedges represent residential, commercial, and city-owned buildings. While these buildings, the energy use accounts for almost 40% of emissions, most of those emissions are from natural gas. As electricity becomes cleaner, those emissions, the light blue and the light yellow, will get smaller and ultimately disappear. Berkeley is now getting cleaner energy from our local electricity provider, East Bay Community Energy, which is a local government partnership whose mission is to provide the cleanest energy at the lowest cost to customers. So emission from natural gas in buildings is about a third of our community emissions, shown in the dark yellow and the dark blue wedges. The only way to phase out those emissions is to transition away from natural gas appliances like furnaces and water heaters to electric heat pumps. Approximately 3% of the emissions from waste are from wastes going to the landfill because our inventory does not include emissions created when we buy things, so from things like food and clothing. So given this emissions breakdown, how are we doing at reducing them? This graph shows our emission reduction trend since the base year of 2000 till 2016. So as you can see, overall emissions have decreased by 15%, despite a population increase of 18% during that same period. So this emissions reduction trend is an impressive accomplishment for the Berkeley community, and it's due to energy efficiency, warmer winters, and cleaner electricity, as well as reduction in waste going to the landfill. The transportation sector, the largest single source and most difficult to address, shows an increase of 8.5%. So to summarize, our efforts to protect the climate have successfully reduced emissions. However, we need to accelerate these reductions to address the climate crisis and meet the ambitious goals set by the city. So simply put, the 3 steps to transition to clean energy are reduce, clean, and electrify. So step 1 is to reduce. In the transportation sector, we need to get people out of cars, and we want to increase walking, biking, and public transit. We want to reducing wastes, reduce emissions, and we can do that by encouraging conscious choices around consumption and increasing recycling and composting. In buildings, energy can be reduced through efficiency measures and green building practices. Step 2 is to clean the electricity we use by getting it from renewable sources. We can purchase clean electricity from East Bay Community Energy that offers greener, cleaner, lower-priced electricity options. And then step 3 is to electrify existing energy uses, replacing gasoline vehicles with electric vehicles and replacing natural gas furnaces and water heaters with electric heat pumps. So now we're going to give a brief overview of current and upcoming activities that demonstrate how we're achieving this. Reducing energy use in transportation means getting people out of cars and onto bikes, buses, and walking. This means changing behaviors and making other options safe and convenient. And Berkeley's been successful in these areas. Compared to other cities our size, we have the highest bicycle commute rate and the second highest walk-to-work rate in the country. But we need to do more, and we need to invest more to reduce the number of cars on the road. Berkeley completed a bicycle master plan in 2017 and is now implementing improvement projects such as the Hearst Complete Streets project, and in the process of updating the pedestrian master plan. The goal of this plan is to create a model city where walking is safe, comfortable, and convenient. Achieving zero waste requires that we reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost. In addition to a large expansion in commercial recycling, the city is in the process of major strategic planning effort to accelerate zero waste with the transfer station redesign study. Also this coming year, SB 1383, a state law, will bring significant new requirements for Berkeley and other local governments to reduce organic waste that will include a host of programs to reduce edible food from the waste stream. And Berkeley has been a leader in reducing energy and water use in buildings. The Building Energy Saving Ordinance, BESO, is one of the most comprehensive regulations in the country aimed at improving energy efficiency in existing buildings. The ordinance requires all buildings being sold to get a home energy score with efficiency recommendations. The energy label is shown here. Large buildings are required to report annual energy use and conduct audits every 5 years. Over the next year, we'll be conducting an evaluation on the effectiveness of the ordinance in light of new opportunities to combine energy efficiency with electrification. Municipal energy efficiency projects have resulted in a 10% reduction in energy use and a 35% reduction in water use, despite a 17% increase in city facilities. Efficiency and zero net energy projects are highlighted in the municipal energy report. Next, we need to make sure that the electricity we're using is clean. Clean electricity can be purchased from our local energy provider, East Bay Community Energy. They offer 3 choices. Bright Choice is less expensive and cleaner than PG&E, currently 85% emissions-free, and they're committed to cleaning that energy over time. Brilliant 100 and Renewable 100 are emissions-free. The city already opted up our own municipal accounts to Brilliant 100, and we're conducting a broad outreach program to encourage all residents and businesses to stay enrolled in EBCE and to opt up to emissions-free electricity. So to opt up, we're sending people to the EBC website, and there's a opt-up button that you just click on to opt up. The next step is to electrify transportation and buildings, specifically programs that focus on the transition from fossil fuels to clean electricity and the transition from gasoline-powered cars to electric cars and bikes. Berkeley has high electrical vehicle adoption rates, with nearly 17% of new vehicles registered over the last year were electric. The completion of the Center Street Garage provides 20 new EV charging spaces with capacity for 57 spaces. We're currently developing a comprehensive action-based EV roadmap to find opportunities to increase equitable access to electric vehicles within Berkeley's diverse community. The city is also working on city fleet electric vehicle replacement strategy, and Public Works has ordered 10 plug-in hybrids this year and plans to order more in the coming year. Electrifying buildings includes rooftop solar paired with battery storage, as well as phasing out natural gas furnaces and water heaters and replacing them with heat pumps. Heat pumps are highly efficient and use electricity to heat and cool. Along with the Building Energy Saving Ordinance evaluation, we'll be developing a clean building strategy funded by Council that will result in a package of policy recommendations that combine mandates such as time of use requirements with incentives such as transfer tax rebates to help us reach our goal of clean energy buildings. For new construction, implementation of the Deep Green Building Initiative is focused on analyzing the new 2019 building codes to find opportunities to encourage or require electrification through the adoption of REACH codes. Energy codes that exceed the state must be approved as cost-effective by the California Energy Commission prior to adoption. And we're working on a tight timeline with several leading California cities to develop those proposals. So that was a quick overview of our policies and programs that get us on a path to clean energy. So we start with 1, reducing, 2, clean energy, and 3, the final step of electrification is costly, and it will require strategic investments in people, infrastructure, and buildings. Through our strategic planning, including the EV roadmap and the clean energy building strategy, we'll come back with proposed policies and programs that fit within the resilience framework: equity, resilience, and community partnerships. Now, the next few slides show how we apply that framework in our programs. Equity is central to our program development, and we were awarded a grant to host a regional workshop on equitable climate preparedness planning that will take place in February. This will inform our adaptation work as we move forward. This year, we also participated in the development of a national guidebook on equitable clean energy program design, and we're using that to integrate equity into our strategic planning processes. Leading with equity is the best way to guarantee multi-benefit program outcomes. We also prioritize programs that build community and help us adapt to a changing climate. The recent council-led zoning changes that support urban agriculture and community gardens, such as Urban Adama, are part of this strategy. We've also updated our local hazard mitigation plan, which documents the city's climate adaptation work to mitigate hazards such as extreme heat, sea level rise, flooding, air quality, and energy assurance. So our greatest strength lies within our community. Our office, the Office of Energy and Sustainable Development, co-convenes the Berkeley Climate Action Coalition with the Ecology Center. And they're here now tonight with us. They are the implementation arm of the Climate Action Plan within our community, and they host events that bring local adults and youth leaders together, building capacity and community. So we have invited our two major partners, UC Berkeley and Berkeley Lab. They are not included in our missions inventory as they're outside our jurisdiction, but they're obviously a large part of the community, and we wanted you to hear about their ambitious climate action efforts. We'll first hear from Kara Stahl, Sustainability Director at UC Berkeley, and then from John Elliott, the Chief Sustainability Officer.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today to share with you a little bit about what we're doing at UC Berkeley, what our goals are, and then some of the actions we've been taking over the last decade, and a little bit of a look forward on what we're planning on doing. So Berkeley's sustainability program and climate action program is guided by a shared policy across the UC system. So the 10 campuses in our medical centers across California, we have a shared UC sustainable practices policy that guides anything from climate action to what we're going to do with clean energy, how we build our buildings, to procurement, to transportation, food, waste, water, and I've probably missed a few, but we continue to grow that policy there. So in recent times, we've set a very ambitious carbon goal. We have a carbon neutrality goal for year 2025 that encompasses all of the energy that we use in our campus buildings, as well as the fuel that we use in our fleet. We also track our carbon emissions in transportation around the areas of commute, business air travel, the emissions associated with our waste and our water as well. Falls into the Scope 3 area, and we have a little bit longer time frame on getting to carbon neutrality on that following the state's guidelines of 2050 for those emissions. So at UC Berkeley, we've had an Office of Sustainability for the last decade, and we've been tracking our emissions for the last 12 years on an annual basis. And what we've seen is an ability to reduce our emissions to levels they were lower than they were 25 years ago, 1990. We met that target a few years ago. We've also taken actions around energy efficiency, similar to what Billy was describing, in terms of that being kind of our first focus. How do we reduce demand in our energy use? Those efforts have reduced our emissions by about 15,000 tons and saved us a couple $1 million on an annual basis through those efficiency measures. Moving forward, we have a much more ambitious energy efficiency target, which is to be reducing the intensity of our energy use in our buildings by 2% annually, and we're just rolling out that program now, so we should be seeing some additional investments in that area. We also, any of our new buildings or any large renovations that we do have to meet certain green building standards. So about 12% of our square footage space now is LEED certified with a focus on energy reductions. And moving forward, we have a another ambitious goal that just came into play in our policy, which is that any new building that we build going forward after June 2019 needs to be zero net carbon, either through a climate action plan process or through an electrification process, as Billy was describing. We have a fairly small fleet for the size of our population, and now 35% of that is operated on alternative fuels. We've installed 6 on-site solar PV installations on campus, almost 1 megawatt of solar power now. And we're looking in this upcoming year to do another competitive bidding round for more sites. We hope to have between 5 and 10 more sites in the next list for on-site solar. We're also very happy that we were able to join into the East Bay Community Choice Energy Program this year as well. We took any of our eligible accounts that we had for that program and moved them to the Brilliant 100 program. So that was about 6 million kilowatt hours a year, and we think we're going to save about 1,200 tons of carbon from that move. And in the commute area, over 80% of our population commutes by something other than driving alone. They're ride sharing, they're riding bikes, they're taking transit, and it's an area that we're actually very proud of in terms of what we've been able to do in that area in terms of providing those facilities. Moving forward, more of the same, but accelerated. We have more work to do. So we've been, like I said, we will continue to focus on demand reduction, but we will be looking at more and creative ways to bring renewable energy into our system and reduce our carbon impacts. So thank you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the opportunity to present along with the city staff. We have a very active sustainability program at the lab, and what I would like to do is just give you some highlights of our key sustainability strategies. I think you'll see many similarities in our approaches to what has been presented for the city and for UC Berkeley, and I'll also share some of our results. A big focus for us over the last 2 years really has been excellence in facility operations. So we call that ongoing commissioning. We have a team that is continuously looking for problems in the buildings, working to fix them, and it's generating significant energy and water savings. We complement that focus on operations with more traditional efficiency retrofits. So a good example of that is a project that we're doing over multiple years across the Hill, which is a site-wide transition to LED lighting with controls. We just finished a garage retrofit there. The savings were 95%. It's almost laughable, I know, but it's a big savings from the new technology and better controls. These savings are starting to add up. So we have a portfolio of efficiency savings that is now 6.7 million kilowatt hours of electricity and gas savings. And you can think of that, just to put it in perspective, that's about the amount of energy that would be output from a 4.3 megawatt solar array. That would take 17 acres, which we don't have space for on the Hill. So we focus more on that efficiency. It's a lot cheaper. In fact, it pays for itself. It pays you back. We've also been focusing on savings in natural gas use. It's been a particular focus over the last few years, improving our metering and monitoring. And in this last year, our natural gas use is 9% below 2015 levels. So we're very proud of that. Another focus for us is in new construction. So on the Hill, we only develop sites that have been previously developed. So typically we're taking an old building that is less efficient and replacing it with new construction. And I think we're really showing leadership in next generation new construction. These new buildings are very energy and water efficient and electrified. It's been a big focus of the presentation here. That means not using natural gas for space and water heating, but using cleaner electricity and using that grid that's going to get cleaner and cleaner over time, or using local solar or photovoltaic generation. If you look at the example, we have a building that's completing in early summer. That building will use 70% less energy than the facility it's replacing. With all of this work, we're working hard to make sure that all of these savings stick. So we're using new technologies, software and IT technologies, to better monitor the buildings and ensure that those savings stay. And we're just doing hard work on the ground to institutionalize those savings and make sure that energy and water management become part of everyday process. We're using an international ISO 50001 standard to do that. As well, you can't just focus on buildings, you have to focus on commutes as well. So we continue efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our commutes. We've put a lot of effort over the last 5 years into being EV ready and supporting the growing EV charging community. We have now a quite vibrant community up on the Hill and 27 charging stations that support that. We also changed out 9 vehicles for EVs this year in our fleet. We just opened a North Berkeley shuttle line, so that's a key strategy to reduce traffic through North Berkeley to the Berkeley site. We've also been focusing on carpool, dedicating more carpool spaces on the Hill. The last item that I'd like to touch on is a big outreach effort for us, which is enabling the community to meet our goals for zero waste. So that's diverting more than 90% through composting and recycling from the landfill by 2020. So this is the same goal as at UC Berkeley. So a lot of outreach. We're also collecting a lot of data to support this. We do waste audits behind each of our major buildings and share that data with the folks in the building. It's surprisingly interesting. So we're at 76% now and working to that 90% goal. You can go to our website, Sustainable Berkeley Lab, or sbl.lbl.gov, and there's more information, and I specifically called out a data section which is continuously updated as these numbers change. We update our energy savings every month. So thanks again for inviting us to participate.
Thanks to both of you. And in closing, we'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our activities on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Berkeley, and also for your leadership in having us go faster and further. So the strategic planning efforts underway in transportation, waste, and buildings are going to provide pathways for further reductions in energy, clean electricity, and electrification of buildings and transportation. So we look forward to returning to you for direction and prioritization and funding on the findings of these strategic plans. So we thank you for your attention and welcome your questions.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's an excellent report. And now, with the council's cooperation, I'd like to open it up for public comment. How many people in the audience would like to comment? 1, 2. Okay. Please line up on the far wall, and each of you will have 2 minutes.
So I'll try to get through this quickly. I have 3 comments to make, or 3 points. 2050 is just not ambitious enough. I sent you a link to a number of articles yesterday about the extinction domino effect. I'll just read this little quote quickly. If all of humankind were to disappear, the world would regenerate back to the rich state of equilibrium that existed 10,000 years ago. If insects were to vanish, the environment would collapse into chaos. We're losing insects in huge mass, and it's related to the warming of our planet, and we need to act very quickly, or we are going to be careening towards extinction by the end of this century. So this is really serious stuff, and all this is nice, but it's really not enough. The second point I'd like to make is that as a city, we should not have the sale of gasoline-powered cars. All the cars that are sold here should either be hybrids or plug-ins. We need to act on that as quickly as possible and eliminate the sale of gasoline-powered vehicles. Say within a year or 2, that would be what I would recommend. And if you think that just having a great transportation system is going to eliminate cars, I just spent 3 weeks in Europe and Germany, and they have absolutely amazing transportation, and the streets were filled with cars in Berlin and Munich, so it requires a lot more. And my last comment is on the East Bay Community Energy. And my neighbor, who I walk with every day, or almost every day, was sort of angry today. She said, I got this postcard in this mail that I no longer have PG&E. And so all of us who are immersed in this and know what the East Bay Community Energy is, there are citizens in our community who don't. And I think we need to do a lot more, and I also believe that given the crisis that we're in, we really should be at 100% at the beginning. And I'll quit there since I'm out of time.
Thank you. Next.
I'm surprised other people don't have much to say, crowd. But hi, my name is Armando Davila. I'm the son of Cheryl Davila, council member. And agreed, the situation is very dire. I think it would take the sum total of every city in the Bay Area lobbying the state of California and every progressive state in this country lobbying the federal government to get us on track with the kind of Green New Deal type conversation that is needed to get this country into a fully employed, fully functioning mass mobilization effort. The climate emergency resolution that called on the citywide mobilization as a concept, I think is a valuable paradigm response at this point, and considering the emissions gap report saying we need to like triple or quadruple efforts worldwide. I appreciate all the work that y'all have been doing, and it'd be nice to know like where the failings are so that we in the broader community could come involved and throw some weight behind it. I'm really concerned that business as usual is incapable and incompatible with dealing with the crisis at this point, and would love to see y'all and everyone in this room kind of rallying and uniting to get a systems change on the deadline that we actually have. I have not caught up on the federal report, but my understanding was that 1.5C is not safe, and that's what we're currently not even failing to meet. And so every 10th degree of warming that happens increases our unsafety, increases the instability of our lasting throughout the century. And so I would encourage also to bring up the city's goals to 100% or more by 2030 transition. And then there's resilience. So I'd love to see this planning that happens to be really focused on people, the people that live in the city of Berkeley. I think we need to bring them along, and the institutional boundaries are a huge hindrance. And unless we overcome the collective the non-understanding of how severe the crisis and the inability to engage in the transition efforts, we're not going to meet our goals here, and that this government needs to rally other governments to move faster. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Martin?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Martin Bork, Ecology Center. Just want to thank staff for all their hard work and the many divisions in the city that take this issue so seriously, and for council for all your leadership over the years on this important topic. I think the fires recently really, over the last couple of years, really have brought home for Berkeley residents how real this is. I think it's easy to think, you know, there's this big global problem and it's out there someplace and it will affect us at some point. Having to shut down city services this year, our recycling trucks were not able to drive. We had drivers out working through that smoke for most of the time. I know the city employees were doing the same. I appreciate your leadership and staff's leadership and calling a day off when it got really bad, but we also had to close our farmers markets. So the impacts are just becoming very real, and we need to very much plan for those impacts that we know are going to hit us here in Berkeley. And so already we know fire and smoke are going to be part of our new normal, and beginning to have the plans in advance so that we're not all scrambling to figure out what the heck to do. You know, when we close our farmers markets, what do we tell the farmers? What are we telling our employees? Are we paying them? Do they get overtime to come back the next time? And there's just a whole host of questions that come up when you have to make something like that happen on the fly. So planning in advance, thinking about the flooding, we know that those are the two main things that are going to impact Berkeley. So I want to, thank council and other speakers and staff for really gripping the fact that our existing plans and goals are not nearly good enough. The things that we have done so far have been the things that have been easier and more acceptable to do. Going forward, they're going to be more costly to do, and more costly if we don't do things, and also less easy for people to accept. And so the kinds of solutions that are going to be required are bolder, maybe more uncomfortable, and more costly. And I think that I just want to encourage everyone to think in that realm, because if we stay with what's convenient and what's cost effective, we really won't be able to address the problem. So thank you.
And Martin, I just want to take this opportunity to recognize your leadership and the Ecology Center's partnership with the city in trying to reach our climate goals. Thank you very much for all the work
Thanks
you've
for
done.
that, and our staff has really done an amazing job at the Ecology Center in supporting this work in so many ways. Amy Kaiser's here with us today, has been a real champion on this work, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment at this point? Okay, then we'll open it up to the council. Now, apparently the little machine isn't working. So I think we'll just go down the road, and I think we'll start with Councilmember Davila.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. So I did have a couple of questions. One is on page 9 of 45 of the report, you talk about 17% of the city vehicles. Are they city-owned vehicles or city-wide vehicles that are EV? Because you talked about registration. So I wasn't.
They're citywide.
Okay. And then in the report, I was happy that you stated the fossil-free, fuel-free Berkeley on page 16 of 45. However, I was really disappointed that you did not include the climate emergency declaration, because that's what we did as well on that same exact day. So, and I think that should be included. Otherwise, we're not really moving towards that emergency that we're facing. And I don't recall seeing, I put a note, let me see if I can find the page, but talking about water and capture in like new buildings and part of the whole process when we're looking at that, especially with the transfer station that's going to be brand new, spanking new, hopefully, be like state of the art and do everything that it's supposed to do, and including possibly dealing with some of the food waste. And I know I never take out the trash, but I understand that our dumpster gets filled with all this stuff that it's not supposed to be in there, and we're not like looking at that. So that should be, although that's not this talk, but it's still part of the whole process. We need to be like fining people for putting stuff in there that's not, it's a revenue source, plus it would be dealing with, recycle, reuse, and all that. Which isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see that happening at the level. I know in Oakland it happens and people get fined. And let's see. And do we know the number, like what is the number that we're at with our greenhouse gas reduction currently?
Billy, maybe we can go back to that slide that shows the trends. So this slide, I'm not sure if it's in front of you right now. It's in front of us.
It keeps going on and on.
Oh, okay.
We have the hard copy.
Yeah,
Okay.
I remember seeing it. It was 15% or something.
Yeah, 15% reduction in community-wide greenhouse gas emissions since 2000,
Yeah,
which
I have
includes building, energy use, transportation,
I got it.
and zero waste, which puts us. What the actual number on the graph I'm just looking at in terms of the number of tons per year is illustrated on the graph there. And we can get that specific number for you, council member, and just.
Around 620,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent.
I didn't hear that.
620,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions emitted per year.
What percent?
We put the inventory as attachment 1. It's got more specific information.
Okay. Let's see, what else did I have? I just think that, as my son so eloquently put, we need to stop thinking 2050 and start thinking more sooner. I don't even know if 2030 is really an unrealistic goal anymore, because we're talking about 2 years, some say 12. So that's, let's see. I'll let someone else go, because I think I have some more questions, but I want to get them before I ask. Thank you.
And maybe I could just address that last point, if I may, briefly. And, you know, the voters of Berkeley approved a 2050 greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, but you're absolutely right that doesn't mean that we wait to reduce those emissions. That in order to achieve as ambitious of a target as we have, which is an 80% reduction by 2050, it takes dramatic reductions every year. And that's what our climate action plan and the work that we talked about tonight are designed to achieve. And completely agree that more urgency is needed every year.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was an incredible presentation, succinct but really full of important information, and I'm delighted that we've had the opportunity to hear from all the other jurisdictions that are actually part of Berkeley, and so I really thank you for that. A couple of the things that really grabbed me, Martin Bork's statement that we're moving, that the easy stuff, well, it's not all done, but we certainly have moved more easily through the easy stuff. And I think that that is a really important thing for us to remember, that now we're going to really have to start tackling the things that are maybe a little uncomfortable, maybe more costly, and we're going to have to start putting more resources. And more resources, not just in the stuff that we do, but also in how we community organize, how we make sure that everybody in Berkeley has the information that they need and the resources they need to make changes, because as difficult as it is, I think, for the lab and for UC Berkeley to make change, they essentially have captive audiences. And certainly Berkeley Lab, they are literally the world leader in coming up with this stuff. I mean, that's a large portion of what they do, is figure out how to do better insulated windows and siding for buildings that is itself solar. And I'm sure you could tell us a long line. I'm making those up, but I'm pretty sure you're working on things like that. So obviously, not only do you have a captive audience, but you have a highly motivated and technically extremely well-versed audience. But getting an entire community to make changes person by person and how they sort their waste and what kind of vehicles they buy and whether they do a remodel on their house or not. You know, the city has the heaviest lift here, I think, and it's going to take a lot. So I really appreciate that reminder that Martin has given us. I also really like that you guys were able to sort of distill things to reduce, clean, and electrify. It's just a helpful way for us to think, you know, what does each of the things that we're thinking of doing plug into? So I hope that you'll really promote that both in the city and in the community. It's something that we can all relate to, so I think that's great. For the city, I feel like on the energy, both in buildings and in the use, not just in the buildings we build and in building retrofits, and also in the energy consumption through our buildings, that we have a pretty good grasp on what needs to be done, and huge strides have been taken. East Bay Community Energy, biggest stride we could possibly take. The BASO, which, you know, these are, I think we know what we need to do, and we know the next thing we need to do is move away from gas to electric. So I feel like we have a good roadmap there, but the transit piece, that is where I think it's our next big frontier as a city, to not just say, yeah, we know we need bikes and we know we need this and that, but really come up with a fine-grained master plan, how we are going to help people reduce their emissions. And I think it was Kelly who mentioned being in Europe recently, when they have amazing transit. They have trains and trams and subways and bikes, and their use of vehicles is skyrocketing. And I noticed this, my father's was French, and I go to France a lot, and over my entire lifetime, everyone used to take the subway in Paris. Now everyone owns a car. It's crazy. Everyone drives in Paris. Why would you do that? So we really need to look more at than just modes. I think it goes deep into the demands that people have in their lives, the amount of hours they need to work in order to make a living, the complexity of childcare and of schools, and the difficulty people have juggling complex and demanding lives with less and less resources, and the convenience of the automobile that allows you to sequence a whole lot of things at once. I think it goes really deep, much deeper than what we have thought about. And I think we really need to do that work. In Berkeley, we have very different transit needs. My district and Susan's, we have an aging population, and we have a lot of people with children. And it's hilly. So bikes are great for most of Berkeley, but they really are a very limited solution in our neighborhoods, the neighborhoods we represent. So where's the fine-grained plan that, you know, we think this population, the students, this is the transit, we think these are the solutions for them. And the people in this neighborhood, we've really studied it, we think this is their solution. I really haven't seen that in a comprehensive way, and I think that is the next frontier for us as a city, and I hope we can do that. Couple little questions for Berkeley and Berkeley Lab. I was curious about, you mentioned that you track commute data. I was wondering, do we do that? Because I would imagine commuting is a huge issue in Berkeley, but I was wondering, do we do that, and how do they do that? Or maybe we already do it.
Is the question, do we track commute data for our employees or for the community?
No, for the city. Do we know anything about what our emissions are as a city? Many people work outside of Berkeley. There's a ton of commuting that's generated by Berkeley residents.
The answer is yes. But I want to qualify by saying that the data that we get is from the regional agency, Metropolitan Transportation Commission.
Okay.
And that data is not extremely fine-grained, but what that data is supposed to model is trips that either start or stop in Berkeley, and trips that start and stop in Berkeley. So it doesn't track trips that just go straight through Berkeley on Interstate 80, but it does track all trips that either start or stop and start and stop.
Okay. Well, I suppose if we do something big, we can drill down on that more around transit. And my other question was, well, I think this is for Berkeley Labs. First of all, you mentioned that you guys do these facility walkthroughs, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the nomenclature. You had a really nice name for it. That you guys go through your buildings all the time. Yes.
Looking at building operation, finding faults, fixing them.
Is that something that we do? And if it isn't, is this a partnership area? Because again, no matter how much expertise we have in the city of Berkeley, I don't think any place in the world matches the expertise of Berkeley Labs. So are we benefiting optimally from the possibilities of partnerships?
The answer to that question is also yes, but I will qualify it by saying that I think there's vastly more potential for us to coordinate together. We do get a lot of ideas from the lab. We partnered from the lab very directly, for example, on our microgrid research project. The lab was a partner on that project. Kira and her team we consult with on what they're doing in their buildings, what we could be doing in our buildings. So it is happening, but I agree with you, there's also a lot more potential for us to do more.
Great. I'm glad to know that we're already doing it, and I look forward to figuring out ways that we can partner more closely. You mentioned that the lab is replacing a lot of buildings and that you're getting a lot of energy savings from that. Are you including embodied energy, or are you just talking about operational energy use?
I'm really talking about operational energy use. That's been the primary focus, but embodied energy is important to consider. But those numbers were really about operational energy use.
I'd be interested in knowing, you know, I don't know what kinds of facilities you're taking down, but taking down old buildings and putting up new is very energy intensive as well. And I'm always curious about the trade-off there, so it'd be interesting to know a little more about that. I think that was pretty much it. I did want to just thank the Ecology Center also for their partnership, and they bring amazing things to the city of Berkeley. They don't just respond, and I want to thank Martin and the Ecology Center for bringing the single-use disposables that we're going to be looking at next week. It's groundbreaking, and everybody should know that it is something they brought to us. So it's just an incredible resource for Berkeley, and they operate on a very small budget. So just want to call them out for that and thank them.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go next because the mayor is on his way, and so I'll be displaced. Well, first, I want to thank the lab for your excellent vegetation management program. This is a great concern of mine, and I really appreciate all of the work that you do. You do a fantastic job.
Great, thank you.
So you're a model for what we should all be doing. I want to follow up on a public comment that we received about the publicity around the EBCE program. I'm getting a lot of calls from constituents. They're very confused. They don't know what's really going on. There's speculation out there that actually the energy that will be getting is, if you trace it back, is coal sourced. And so I think that there's a lot of confusion out there in the community, and we really need to figure out how to be transparent and get the word out so people understand what they're doing. So this is a big thing. I know we're moving ahead quickly, but I think we need to address it somehow. I have a question for you, C. How many EV chargers does the campus have available for faculty, staff, and students who might be driving to campus?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We have very few at this point. I've been talking to the Director of Parking and Transportation, who has a goal, I believe, to add 25 in the upcoming year or so. He's working on a project right now. We have several EV chargers in our Upper Hurst garage, and then in our, there is a bank of EV chargers available in the Maxwell parking lot by the stadium.
Okay. I know your Upper Hurst garage is about to be remodeled as housing.
That is in the works. Some
of the parking will be replaced there, but I urge you to put EV chargers in there, as many as you possibly can, because I just think the university should be a leader in this area, and you do have people who have to come in with vehicles who don't have other modes of transportation, and we should be making it easy for people to be driving EVs.
Yeah, so. I appreciate that, and I will certainly relay that message back to our Parking and Transportation Department. And I did see some recent plans for the Upper Hurst parking garage, and it will have a number of EV chargers added to it.
Great. And also for people who are coming for events, you know, football games and concerts and all of that. It should we really need to make a push in our transportation sector to make it as easy as possible to drive EVs. So, okay, great, thank you. I just read this morning that the state is now requiring solar on all new construction. Does that apply to state agencies like the university and the lab? Well, the lab is federal, but state agencies as well?
I believe it's just single-family homes.
It's only single-family homes? Okay.
Low rise, yeah.
Okay, it'd be great if it were all new construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We are looking, when we are looking at a new building or a renovation on a project by project, we do look at solar capacity and availability, and also if it's not going to be available at the time, to make it solar ready. So we are thinking in that direction.
Okay. On a question for the lab, I'm really happy to hear about this North Berkeley shuttle. I didn't know anything about it.
It just started a couple weeks ago.
And is it possible to get a map of the route?
Sure.
Is that available
it's on our
online?
website. If you just, if you Google LBNL, North Berkeley Shuttle, you'll go right to the page. There's a page that has all of the shuttles and all of their routes.
Okay, great.
Times.
Okay, that's
We can
really
certainly
great to
provide.
hear. And are your shuttle buses hybrids or EVs?
No, they are, the main shuttles are diesel, and they also use a biodiesel blend, but they're not.
Okay, is that true for the Bear shuttle, whatever that's called, that the university uses?
Similarly, we have diesel buses that can run on biofuel blend, and we have smaller vehicles that we run for our night services, and those are mostly gasoline-powered or hybrid.
Okay. So I think,
I think it's a North Berkeley BART route.
oh, okay, I'll look at it later.
BART, it's not for North Berkeley.
Oh, yeah, I have another question regarding the transportation issue. You know, we have all this sharing, the sharing economy, the gig cars, the Ford bikes, and all this stuff. And I know from years of trying to get AC Transit to improve their service to the North Berkeley Hills, that they rely on data on users, on how they decide to run their routes, how frequently to run their routes. The routes now in North Berkeley are really token routes. And the bus is not very well used except by Berkeley High kids getting home, you know, at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm concerned, I would like to see some data, and I don't know if it exists, and see if we can figure out a nexus between this new sharing economy with the gig cars and the Ford bikes and now the scooters, and see if we can figure out if it's cutting into AC Transit ridership. Because that is going to have a devastating effect on public transit along certain routes. And it's just a concern that I have looking forward. So, okay. Lori.
Thank you so much for your report. It was really illuminating. And I also want to congratulate the city on the Soul Smart Gold Award as well. That was really exciting. This is a really comprehensive plan, and I want to thank you for that. I also want to bring up one area that I think is really important. And it was mentioned and I've cited it a couple times, in Dan Kamen's research around carbon footprint planning, and that's quantifying local and state mitigation opportunities. And the 4 interventions that they had were pretty well documented in the report. But there's one area that I want to make sure that we're not losing sight of, and that's urban infill, and that has the biggest impact on transportation emissions. So as much as we have we focus on EVs, that's still not going to solve the problem. We need to make sure that people can live close to where they work. And so that's something that we need to be able to facilitate. Also, I was wondering about, you know, we've talked about some uncomfortable interventions and looking at our parking management, which I know was described in the report, and also thinking about perhaps congestion pricing and looking at induced demand, so free parking on Sundays. And these are really politically untenable and very difficult decisions to make, but have enormous impacts. And again, I just really want to highlight the transportation emissions being the biggest problem. And again, it will not solely be solved by, you know, everyone driving EVs. As much as, you know, I want everybody, if they choose to drive a car to be able to, one, have the money to afford an electric vehicle, but oftentimes those aren't available, as you all know. And so figuring out how we can create a robust transportation network, so looking at transit-only lanes, figuring out ways that we can improve AC transit, improve our transit infrastructure, looking at these PDAs, and then, of course, I appreciate you mentioning implementing our bicycle master plan. Oftentimes, we want to, I know that many people have indicated to me that they want to ride their bicycle more. You know, I have an e-bike where I drop my two kids off at school. It might be a little awkward when they get to be teenagers, but certainly that people want a safe place to be able to ride their bicycle, and so having protective bike lanes and an integrated system, I think, is incredibly important. I was really excited that we passed some scooter movement towards allowing scooters in our city. And another big piece will be implementing Vision Zero. So I just want us also not to lose sight of our Vision Zero plan. But more than anything, and I'm only going to focus on one area here, is looking at those, that report in particular around carbon footprint planning and looking at the interventions. The biggest impact, one of the biggest impact is looking at urban infill and how can we allow people to live closer to their jobs. And so I just really don't want to lose sight of that in our climate action plan. I very much appreciate your report, and it's really exciting to hear from you all, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, hi. Thank you again for this report. As you know, we have a climate subcommittee that's been working on evaluating some of these issues, and just learning about what we've been doing as a city has been an incredible experience for me. I had no idea the breadth of activities going on being undertaken by the city, by the Ecology Center, et cetera. So I want to just thank you for that. It's been a really big learning process. In terms of transportation, I think one partner we have not mentioned is BART. If we're going to be looking at infill housing, which we need to do at these BART stations, we're going to need to find a way to get people to and from the BART station. That is probably one of the main reasons why people drive, is to get to transportation. And I'm going to sort of challenge BART here at this meeting and ask that they work with us on trying to figure out how to do that. It shouldn't be we're doing BART and we're doing the housing, but that transportation problem we just left you with is not in our ambit. We need to work together on that with AC Transit as well. So I'm really looking forward to that being a focus for us. I also hope that we'll be looking with AC Transit at the system of on-demand buses that they have in the Newark portion of the AC Transit District. I'm not certain why that location was chosen for the pilot, but I think it's something that we should definitely be exploring and would help a lot in the hills where we need smaller buses, maybe running less frequently, but where the buses are needed nonetheless. An area we haven't talked very much about is the sort of embedded consumption, energy impacts. In fact, individuals use about 11 metric tons per person in direct energy use, but it's really, in our census tract, it's 18 tons per person in consumption. The things we buy, which we assign to China, and we say, well, China has terrible pollution. We're using those things. Those are our things. So we have got to think about how do we encourage more local production? How do we do more shop local? It's not a boutique issue. It's a critical issue to our ability to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. I'm hoping we will reflect more on that in future reports. Also, I wanted to comment on the whole issue of SB 1383, which is the reduction in food waste and recovery of editable food. That's not something we talked about a lot here, but we know that food is about creates about a third of our greenhouse gases. So that's an area that I'm looking forward to us doing a lot more on. I know the Ecology Center has been really engaged in that. So hopefully we can reflect on that as we move on. And in that regard, I'd love to hear from you, see a little bit more about your biogas issue program. Where are you doing biogas? What are you finding with that? Is that something you find that the pollution effects aren't greater than the benefit, et cetera? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I think you're referring to the UC system-wide program for developing biogas. So there has been an effort system-wide across the UC system. The 10 campuses and the medical centers have made certain kinds of financial commitments in order that the UC system could move forward and develop biogas. I don't have a lot of details today, but I'd be happy to share some more with you on that, get you some more information. There's been 2 developments. They've been out of state so far. One's been a capping of a landfill for the methane gas, and the second is it's associated with an animal farm, some sort of methane capture there from that piece. They both are, believe, either operational now or almost operational. They'll be producing biogas that will be injected into the natural gas pipeline system. So in a sense, it's kind of an offset program that we're doing. So across UC, we have a natural gas problem like a lot of other people do. We use a lot of natural gas for our heating program. And so we look at the biogas as an opportunity for us to kind of an interim solution for the natural gas that we're using in our plants as we transition to more decarbonized energy.
Thank you for that. As we work on redoing our own transfer station, this seems like an opportune time to be thinking about this issue. I know we want to move away from gas altogether towards electrification. So I just would be interested in an analysis of the balance of those things. You know, we're not going to get off natural gas tomorrow. Is there something we should be doing at the transfer station that relates to trying to look at capturing some of those gases? And I think finally, I just want to say that a lot of the discussion about climate change is about the emergency, and it's incredibly important that we declare it a climate emergency. But what's even more important to me is, at the end of this road, how much better our lives are going to be. So if we could talk about this in slightly different terms when we talk to people, instead of talking only about the downside, what about the upside in public health, in community building, in better food, in reducing pollution, just local pollution that affects us on a daily basis, even that doesn't lead to climate change. So I feel that one of our jobs as a council is to be that voice for how this can give us a better life. It's not just we have to do this in the emergency sense. So we are all responsible for that with our constituents. And finally, I'd like to say that is what I'm looking for direction from staff about how we as the council can help you. How can we help you with leadership on this issue, mobilizing others, dollars, simply policy changes, pilots, and again, yes, considering it an emergency and making sure people understand the importance of that. But there's a lot of tools here in this toolkit, and I'm hoping that as we move through this, we can talk more about what our important role is that would help you meet these goals. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Timothy?
I appreciate that comment about the co-benefits, because it's really true. There's a choice to be. There are some hard choices to be made, but there's a lot of significant co-benefits from those choices, and I think that's important framing. You asked about a question around how you might be able to help, and I wanted to take that opportunity to answer it just briefly. East Bay Community Energy is rolling out, and I understand that many of you are getting questions about it. One of the ways that I think we can work together is that we can share and elevate a common message. The city is putting messaging out about East Bay Community Energy. We'll have a news release that's on the website either tomorrow or Monday, information via Twitter, Nextdoor. And one of the ways that would be great is that you help is if council members take that message and also put it out in your own newsletters to your own constituents, use that information to help answer constituent questions. We can also do additional outreach. We've already partnered with Ecology Center, the Climate Action Coalition, and East Bay Community Energy to do some outreach in our community, and we're going to continue to do more. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to make that point.
I just want to say that we've got a representative, Deirdre Sanders is here from East Bay Community Energy.
So will there be a specific way, if you have a specific question, that you can actually speak to a human being to get an answer?
Yes, there is. There's a website and a call line, and Deidre's here, and she might be actually one of the specific people that answers that question. So Deidre, the call line and the website, I think, is the right answer to that question.
We have a call center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have a call center. If you go to edce.org, and it will have the contact information, including the phone number for the call center, and of course, an email if you want to contact us directly. Plus, the staff is always there. If you need to speak with one of the staff, we can respond as well directly. The call center will take information and pass it to us, and we will directly respond if that's appropriate.
And that information is in the news release that the city is putting out, and the Twitter and Nextdoor messages that we're putting out as well.
Okay, thank you. My apologies for being late. I represent Berkeley on the Alameda County Transportation Commission. We had a long discussion around the CASA Compact, speaking about infill housing and ways to encourage production as well as affordability, as well as changes to the regional transportation funding and OBAG 3, which actually could disqualify the city of Berkeley from OBAG grants as well as other cities in Alameda County. So we had a lot of discussion around how to recommend amendments to that proposal so that Alameda County could be well positioned, because Berkeley and cities in Alameda County are producing housing. And we need to be focusing our strategy on encouraging those jurisdictions that are not producing housing to either produce housing or give us funding so we can produce affordable housing. So my apologies for being late. Thank you, Vice Mayor Wingraf, for chairing the meeting. And I represent Berkeley on the East Bay Community Energy Authority. Councilmember Hahn is the alternate, and we really want to encourage the council members and everyone to spread the word about this exciting program that we have now launched for residential customers. It was 10 years ago that Berkeley commissioned a feasibility study to look at Berkeley, Emeryville, and Oakland to create a JPA to create a CCA. And then we went to East Bay MUD, and then now Alameda County took the lead in creating a countywide CCA, which is now providing cleaner, greener power to people in our communities. The one thing we should encourage our constituents to do is opt up. There are three choices. There's Bright Choice, Brilliant 100, and Renewable 100. Renewable 100 is has the highest amount of renewable content. And in order for us to really meet our climate action goals, we need as many people to participate in Renewable 100 as possible. And so I would like, at a future point, for the Berkeley City Council to consider opting up our municipal accounts to Renewable 100. At the very least, we should do that. And I don't know if the University of California is a ratepayer, but I would encourage the university to consider doing that as well if they haven't already. And then I know there's some discussions that have occurred at the Climate Emergency Subcommittee around whether we want to automatically opt up our ratepayers to Renewable 100 or some other higher renewable content option. I think there are pluses and minuses to that. We are at really a startup phase in this agency, and we want to make sure while we are moving towards getting as much renewable content as possible, that we are also making sure the agency is well positioned to be fiscally solvent and operationally solvent. So we'll have that discussion, I'm sure, at some point in the future. And you certainly have my commitment to try to do whatever we can to move us as quickly as possible to having the largest amount of renewable content. We've had this conversation with our CEO. He knows that we need to move in that direction. I just want to say thank you to staff for all the work that you've done over the years. Berkeley is one of the first cities to have a climate action plan. It's been a model document. And thank you to the Climate Action Coalition for making sure that this isn't just a document that sits on a shelf, but it's a living document that we are working to implement, whether it's through the BASO process, whether it's through the Deep Green Building Initiative, which we are working actively to explore and implement, whether it's through new solar policies, electric vehicle infrastructure, which Councilmember Wingraf has been advocating for, looking at how we can expand our urban forests. There's so many things that we are doing and new things that we need to do. We know with the fires that have occurred, literally choking us in our air, that the emergency is real. And while we are doing a lot, we do need to accelerate the pace at which we are addressing this climate crisis. And that not only involves promoting active transportation, continuing the work that we're doing in our land use policies to encourage transit-oriented development, particularly affordable development, to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, looking at how we can expand transportation options, looking at the actual energy that we're providing our residents. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity, but we need to definitely accelerate the pace at which we are doing this work. And I know our staff are committed to that. We have some of the experts in this work, our planning director and Billy Romaine, the staff in energy and sustainability. And so I'm confident that while we are not quite at our climate action goal, that with the work we're doing with Vision 2050, with the work that we're doing with our transportation and bicycle and pedestrian projects, with our land use strategy, with the initiatives we're doing around solar and moving us towards a voluntary REACH code, hopefully, to make sure that our buildings are truly green and being produced in the city of Berkeley. All these things have a cumulative impact to really make sure that Berkeley is at the forefront of advancing the climate action strategy. And even though our president has reneged on this country's commitment to the Paris Accords, we have committed to continue the commitment of the Paris Accords. I was at the Global Climate Action Summit, and Berkeley made some commitments, some specific additional commitments that are in line with our climate action plan. So the work continues. I want to thank the staff at UC Berkeley for being part of our Vision 2050 working group. There's some exciting work that's being done around looking at how we can create climate resilient and technologically and climate smart infrastructure. It's not just about paving streets and creating walkable spaces and creating the public realm improvements, but doing it in a way that really advances our sustainability goals, reduces flooding, improves water quality. All these things have to be integrated. So thank you. Councilmember Davila.
Thank you again. So I just had a couple more thoughts. One, I was wondering, like, if we have promotional materials that, like for the EBCE, or if we can create materials about the climate, what we're doing, how we can get there, because I think that's an important thing. A lot of people don't understand the urgency, and it would be good if we could, like, together have like a climate emergency declaration town hall where which is what my office and the ad hoc subcommittee is working on, but so that we can talk about the climate, you know, where it is right now, what we can do to get there together, move faster together with UC and the lab. You know, I mean, everybody's, it's all we're all facing the same crisis, so we all need to move together. And in that way, like, how are we gonna prepare children, low-income families, to transition, you know, and to make sure that they are also aware, and the homeless. So I'm just wondering, like, if we can come up with some type of format and materials to help us do that, and to have the town halls as well, and to partner together to do that. That's one question.
Well, I think you raise really important points, and I know you and the others on the climate committee have been thinking a lot about those ideas, and I just want to say that we're absolutely happy to support this work. We understand that it's an urgency, and any way that we can work with you to communicate that message to the community is something we'd be happy to support.
Because I thought that was part of the climate action plan, is mobilization. Mm-hmm. So, like, how have you tried to mobilize currently, say?
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on is probably one of the most difficult challenges we have as an organization, and any organization that is working to, I would say, modify behaviors around climate or any type of issue area. It's how do you reach a large scale of people effectively and efficiently with the resources that we have. That's a really big challenge that we struggle with. We have lots of ways that we do it. We have our online communications. We partner with organizations such as the Ecology Center and the Climate Action Coalition. We do produce materials that we distribute, workshops. We work with council member offices and the mayor. I would point to the Climate Action Coalition as one of the areas that we launched in partnership with the Ecology Center several years ago as really one of those opportunities for community members that want to engage and want to do more and want to get involved, get their hands dirty and do something tangible. That's what the Climate Action Coalition is really designed to support and to accelerate. And so I think we all look forward to continuing that partnership and hopefully elevating that partnership even more because it creates an opportunity for people to get involved. And I think a lot of folks are looking for that, and that's what we need.
And can you talk a little bit more about your regional conveying in February that you spoke of?
We're doing that in partnership with the Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network. Berkeley was a founding member of that group. Timothy did a lot of work to form that as a regional collaborative looking at adaptation.
Do you know like where it's going to be and all that yet, or none of that's been
If I can just suggest, maybe we can ask those questions
sure.
offline.
All right, fine. And then, let's see, I think I had one more question. I can't read my question right now, so never mind. Thank you. I'll ask offline.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll just say that as Berkeley's representative on EBCE, I've been on the board since we started it, which was early 2017, and been involved in all the policy decisions that we've made around the formation of this agency. I am happy to talk to any members of the council around the work that EBC is doing, and actually would encourage Deirdre, maybe EBC staff can reach out to the various Berkeley City Council members, including the 2 new council members that are coming in, and just try to set up some conversations with them to brief them up what we're doing. And so we can be ambassadors for this new agency, which is so important. And I think it's absolutely critical that we accelerate the outreach that needs to be done. I'm on Nextdoor, I'm monitoring the conversations that are happening. People are asking, what is this new agency? Berkeley has the lowest rate of opt-outs of any jurisdiction in Alameda County, which is really a testament to the fact that we care about the environment. But what we need to do is get as many people as possible to opt up, because that is how we're going to really have an impact in reducing GHGs in our city. I will say that the lower tiered option, Bright Choice, is still pretty green. Their goal of the agency is to move that default option as much as possible towards increasing the amount of renewables as we progress. One consideration that we should be aware of is the California Public Utilities Commission recently issued a decision regarding the power charge indifference adjustment, or PCIA, that will lower rates across the board. While that's good for ratepayers, that does mean that the margins of CCAs throughout the region are going to shrink significantly. So we got to be mindful of that as we make these decisions. Councilor Davila?
Yeah, so I was just curious because I understand that there's an opt-up date that you have to opt up before that date, and I'm wondering what that date is. Is there a date? And is it true that after that date you're locked in or some, can you clarify that?
Deirdre, did you want to clarify that point?
Yes, and we're speaking in terms of an individual's account.
Do you want to come up to the podium? That'd be great. I think what Councilor Davila is asking is automatically opting up customers in the city of Berkeley. What's the deadline or timeline by which that could be done?
So we're talking about a citywide decision as opposed to an individual account holder. There is no, at this point, fixed date for an opt-up decision, but we would encourage you to be mindful of when we calendar consideration of rate discussion with the board and consideration of when you want to time it. So while there's no hard and fast date, again, timing is important in terms of when the board would consider a rate decision.
Thank you.
So that will require a special board action, which is what we did for the city of Hayward and the city of Piedmont. But I think your point is well taken. If first, it's going to require a decision of the Berkeley City Council.
Right.
Secondly, it has to go to the EBC Board of Directors. So a lot more discussion.
Right.
Councilor Hahn?
I have a question.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention, since I was, the mayor was not able to be at the EBCE board meeting last night, and I subbed. The opt-out data that we have so far that's been reported is only 10 days. And bills had not been issued yet. People have gotten postcards telling them they had been switched from one electricity provider to another, but they hadn't gotten a bill. And the bills were only sent out, I believe, on Wednesday. So we expect that when people get their bills might be the first time that they actually really notice that they've been switched. So I think that I'm very cautiously optimistic about Berkeley, but I don't think we should read too much into the low opt-out rates. We will have much better information in a month or two. And a corollary to that is that, very sadly, one of the board members from, I believe from Livermore, reported that based on some early negative chatter on one listserv that has very far reach in their city, they now have 10% opt-outs. So I think I think we all need to get better information very quickly across the board. I also have been involved with this thanks to the Berkeley Climate Action Coalition, where I got my start in this. I knew nothing about community choice energy 5-7 years ago, and then I joined the Climate Action Coalition Community Choice Energy subgroup and learned a lot. And I have spoken a lot with the public about community choice energy now for quite a long time, and I have some talking points that people don't glaze over when I say them. And so I also am happy to help colleagues and anyone else find ways to talk about what can be kind of complicated in pretty simple terms that I think people grasp. But I just think we need to be mindful of the fact that it's a big change, and the community isn't necessarily getting all their information from good sources, and we need to be on top of this with good information, or we will, 10% is just huge and not good in the first few days, and that's all because a listserv kind of festered for a couple hours. So we really need to be vigilant.
Questions, comments from the council? Any other questions, comments? Not, thank you very, very much to our staff. Thank you, UC Berkeley, for joining us. It's really a community-wide effort, so the work that's done on and off the campus really makes a huge impact. Thank you for joining us. So we're going to move now to the next agenda item, which is item number 2, a semi-annual report on Measure T1 City Infrastructure Bond Program. And I believe staff from Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront and Public Works will be making the presentation. Madam City Manager, anything you want to say opening? Okay. Thank you. Scott, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Scott Ferris, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront. Along with me here to make that T1.
Is your mic on?
Push. How about that?
There you go.
Okay. So I'm Scott Ferris, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront. Along with me is Andrew Brzinga, who's the Deputy Director of Public Works, and we're making the semi-annual report on T1. Oh, there we go. Okay. Additionally,
just note, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Ferris, that we lost quorum. So if those members of the council can please join us back on the dais. And we're sitting as a committee of the whole, so we can proceed with the presentation as no action is needed, but we do need to restore quorum within 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. So also with me tonight are members of the Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront Capital and Public Works Capital project staff to answer any kind of detailed questions you have about individual projects. All right, page 2. Our agenda for tonight is we're going to do a little background on T1. We're going to overview the projects, and we're going to do some specific project updates. Instead of going through all 34 projects, we're going to focus on 5 areas. We're going to talk about our key issues that we're facing right now, and our T1 policies and procedures manual, talk about our upcoming audit, and our ongoing communication. Okay, next slide. So as you all are very aware, City of Berkeley residents passed a $100 million bond measure, infrastructure bond measure for existing facilities in November of 2016. In June of 2017, the City Council approved a list of 34 projects for Phase 1 after a 6-month public process involving 13 different commissions and multiple public meetings. And for the last 17 months, yeah, next slide. We've been executing those projects. So just to give you a quick summary of what we've been doing, we've sold the bonds, we've hired 5 FTEs, we've started all 34 projects significantly, we've issued 25 contracts and task orders, and post-public process, we've had 15 general meetings with commissions and subcommittees, and 14 project-specific meetings about individual projects. On the screen tonight, on the screen in front of us tonight is our projects update form, which you have attached to your report and is also online. So if anybody's watching at home, this document is on our website at www.cityofberkeley.info/measure T1. And it details out all 34 projects, the stage they're in, the work that's been done, and so on and so forth. During this portion of the presentation, as I mentioned earlier, we want to focus on 5 projects. Instead of talking about all 34 really quickly, we want to spend about 2 or 3 minutes on 5 specific areas. And at the end of the presentation, if you have questions about those projects or any of the other projects, we can answer those questions. And so Andrew's going to take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And good evening, Mayor and Council. Jumping right in, this slide starts off with the Rose Garden projects. The Rose Garden projects improvements consist of about 4 separate projects and are a joint effort between Public Works and the Parks Department. The first project includes ADA improvements to the existing restroom. It includes completing the reconstruction of the pergola, and also includes an accessible path of travel from Euclid Avenue to the pergola itself. Since the pergola is a historical landmark, the T1 team has diligently been working with the Landmarks Preservation Commission to make sure that it's reconstructed to its historic detail. Okay, the next couple of projects includes general maintenance of the garden pathways and Cornice's park pathways. It also includes needed repairs to the tennis courts and its associated retaining wall structures. And finally, the project includes improvements to the Cornice's Creek to repair erosion damage at the downstream end of the Rose Garden, as illustrated in this photo on the bottom of this slide. So since these projects are closely grouped together, we believe it makes sense to sync them into one single cohesive project and bid it out as such, which is what we're currently working on now. And what that gives us is a combined budget of about $3.1 million. $2 million of that, those funds are T1 funds, and the rest come from park tax and general fund monies. So we believe that once all these projects are complete, we should be in great shape at the Rose Garden for years to come. Okay, San Pablo Park. This is one of the most used city parks for recreation programming. Being so well used, many of the facilities are due for major maintenance, which is why we have several T1 funded projects addressing this site. One of our projects includes the renovation of the 5 through 12 play area as well as the tot lot. Basically, the condition of the playground equipment is deteriorating. It just simply needs to be replaced. The tennis courts are also in relatively poor condition and require not only resurfacing treatment, but subgrade improvements as well as to mitigate the surface cracking. Further, we're addressing the Francis Allbrier Community Center. Staff will be starting a robust public process in the spring of 2019, and that's to solicit and receive input from input on the improvements to this particular facility. We've already received some feedback, and so far inquiries are on adding a gymnasium and pool. Meanwhile, the improvements that we are already planning on proceeding with include upgrading the site to a care and shelter facility as part of the city's resiliency plan. Lastly, the city is moving forward with a much-needed renovation to the park's restroom that's gearing up for construction this coming calendar year. Although it's not a T1 funded project, it's just another example of much-needed improvements that we're investing in at that particular site. So overall, the city plans to invest roughly $2.5 million into the park over the next couple of years. $1.8 million of those funds are funded through T1, and the rest, again, from Parks Tax and/or General Fund. Okay, our street improvement project at the marina focuses on 3 main streets. University Avenue from West Frontage Road to Marina Boulevard. It includes Spinnaker Way as well as Marina Boulevard. So the 3 streets combined total to just under 3 lane miles and cover about 5.8 acres. So you can imagine that that makes for a significant street improvement project. Staff is currently working the design phase for University Avenue, as illustrated here, which is the more significant component of the 3 streets. The portion of the work includes shifting the eastbound lane to the north to avoid the undulating pathway one would basically experience while traveling down that side of the road. This work also includes a roundabout at the Marina Boulevard intersection to promote pedestrian bicycle safety, and it's a great location for some future elements of roadway beautification. Staff is also diligently coordinating these efforts with 2 major upcoming projects. One is led by the East Bay Regional Park District, which consists of a major park improvement at the West Frontage Road and University Avenue intersection, and the second being the Caltrans University Avenue Overcross Replacement Project. So the construction phase for this project is projected to start in 2020 with a cost estimate ranging from about $6 to $7.5 million. $3.5 million of those funds are coming from T1. Okay, Adeline Street. The purpose of this project is to provide complete street improvements to Adeline Street from Ashby Avenue to Derby Street. So what basically that means is we're not only going to restore the street pavement, but we're also going to incorporate ADA accessibility improvements, pedestrian safety improvements, and miscellaneous drainage upgrades as well. We also plan to add protected bike lanes going in both directions of the street, as well as adding 4 bus boarding islands in the place of the existing bus stops. So this project is expected to start in the construction into the construction phase in the summer of 2019, and it should take about 4 months to complete. So the funding set aside for this work is about $2.5 million in T1 revenues. Lastly, we've got the North Berkeley Senior Center. One of the key upgrades of this work includes seismic upgrades to the building to reach immediate occupancy rating. What that allows is for the center to be used as an emergency during an emergency. However, this project will also address deferred maintenance upgrades to the interior and exterior of the property, such as roof replacement, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing improvements. And additionally, there will be upgrades that enable improved senior programming, such as acoustical improvements, improved lighting, accessibility improvements, and a front patio remodel for better access and community space. We anticipate this project will be in construction by spring of 2019, and this project will have a construction duration of about 18 months. During that time, the services offered in the Senior Center will be temporarily moved to the West Berkeley Service Center, and those offered currently in the West Berkeley Service Center will be temporarily relocated to 1011 University Avenue. Lastly, the project includes about $6.8 million in T1 funding, with another $1.8 million from a FEMA grant specifically towards the seismic improvements. I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
All right, what Andrew covered was ultimately about 9 of our T1 projects combined into 5 really quickly. And once again, we'll answer any questions on those projects or any other projects at the end of the presentation. So our key issues, the 2 big issues that are facing us now are both financially kind of motivated. One, we have a funding gap, and I'll explain that in a second, and the other one is environmental sustainability. So on the slide in front of you, you see an initial council-approved list of projects for Phase 1 at $37.365 million. In January 23rd, Council authorized additional up to $2 million for the mental health building. It took us to about $39 million worth of estimated projects. Staff sold $35 million worth of bonds in November of 2017, leaving us what we anticipated was like a $4.3 million shortfall. The bond sale transaction sale was $800,000 less than we anticipated, and we moved the transfer station master plan, which out of T1 and funded by Zero Waste, so that saved $500,000, and we overestimated the contribution by ART by $49,000. So those were subtractions, and then our construction, as you well know, construction costs have been higher lately. And large part because of the North Bay fires. But what we're anticipating at this point is the projects that are going to construction, which are a little bit more than $23 million, we're anticipating an escalation of $2.4 million that we didn't account for in our 2015 estimates for this bond measure. So most of the estimates for the 2016 bond measure were done in 2015 with an annual escalation of 3%. Knowing we'd spend the money in 19, 20, and 21. But the escalation rates on construction have been higher, so we're anticipating if we still maintain that level of construction, we'll have another $2.4 million worth of cost. So all that together leaves us with a potential funding gap of $5.4 million. So options for addressing this funding gap, and we've been working with the Public Works and the Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront Commission to identify how to approach this gap. We've had 3 T1 subcommittee meetings. We've got a 4th scheduled in January with the idea that we will come back. We'll get a recommendation from both commissions and staff that'll come to you in May on how to deal with this funding gap. The options are to change a project phase, to move something, for instance, for construction to design, or even move something from design to conceptual, to postpone projects, to eliminate or remove projects, or to identify additional funding sources. So I talked about this a second ago, but starting in October, we started to meet with our commissions once this issue had become very apparent. And as we've met with them and identified, we've started to prioritize projects based on council criteria, which you gave us in the resolutions where you passed around T1. So we've put together some criteria based on those resolutions, started assigning criteria to the projects, and are working with our commissions to score those projects and to develop a prioritization list, which hopefully will lead to a recommendation in March from our commissions, and you'll see soon. And we'll bring to the council in May. Go ahead. So other challenge has been environmental sustainability. You know, our projects are and will be designed to utilize more modern and sustainable technologies. And we're weighing upfront costs of energy upgrades against benefits of lower long-term costs. But additional sustainability elements and improvements above baseline requirements are expensive. And as we've seen construction costs escalate and we've done initial design, conceptual design for a lot of projects, our projects are coming in so much higher than we thought they would. And we're trying to figure out how we're going to incorporate all these sustainable measures into these projects and still do a lot of the other projects in T1. We've got our three largest projects, which represent over 60% of our construction, are very close to going out to bid now or out to bid. The mental health facility is out to bid and due back in December 18th. North Berkeley Senior Center will go out to bid in January and be due back in late January or early February. And Live Oak Center will go out to bid in March and come back in April. So we'll have in the next few months, we're going to have an idea of the cost of construction. And so we've included a lot of the upgrades in construction or as additive alternates in our scopes. And we'll know a lot more in the next 3 to 4 months of where we are and how much money we have. Okay, next slide. All right, it's not on the screen, but the next slide is about our T1 policies and procedures manual. We've hired an outside consultant to work on this manual, and we've got a draft. It's on our website. We've given it to both our commissions at this point, Public Works and Parks, and we're fine-tuning it and hope we'll have the completed version in the next couple months. And then the financial audit. We hope to do 6 audits over the life of this bond measure. So anticipating that the bond measure will be doing projects for 12 years. We're anticipating that we're going to do an audit every 2 years, and we're coming up on our 2 years. We're coming up on our first audit now. Communication. We continue to go out to all the participating commissions yearly. We're just finishing up that process now between staff, and we meet pretty regularly with our T1 subcommittee and the Parks and Waterfront and Public Works Commission. And we've tried to get as much information about T1 out there, and we've advertised on Berkeley side, and we continue to keep our email available so that anybody who has comments about T1 can email to t1@cityofberkeley.info. And then planning for phase 2. We are going to start that process in July of 2019, which is not far from now, and we're gearing up for that process. It'll probably be a little less than 2 years with the public process to decide how we're going to spend phase 2 dollars. All right, that's it. If you got any questions, we can do our best to answer them. If they're project specific, we'll probably bring up a project manager to answer.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to suggest we go to public comment now, and then we can thereafter go to council questions and comments. And I know that well, I represent the whole city, but I know council members have projects in their districts, and might I suggest that if there are specific questions around projects in your district, perhaps we can set up meetings with the city manager and public works staff to go over those issues, and if we can have a more general conversation, because I think you want some specific input specifically around the funding issues and the next phase of T1. That's what I'd like to suggest for this evening. Specific, I know Councilor Hahn has questions around projects in her district, and maybe other council members may, and that may be more appropriate for a more focused conversation. So let's go now to public comments. Welcome Ray Yep and Margot Schuler from the Public Works Commission. I also want to acknowledge we're joined by Councilmember-elect Rashi Kesarwani. Thank you for being here this evening. Margot.
Marco Schuler, Public Works Commission T1 Subcommittee Chair. I did want to acknowledge that staff has been working with us to sort of look at this issue of how do we prioritize things given that the funding doesn't look like it'll cover everything we need to do. But I also want to reinforce that, particularly in context with the discussion that we just had on Climate Action Plan, the sustainability elements and the prioritization along sustainability elements really are crucial to the community. And I think that's going to be a real challenge in terms of balancing everybody's desires to have projects done that weren't developed initially with that lens. And I think that everything we do going forward, it is a climate emergency. We have declared a climate emergency. Everything we move forward with now has to have that lens as we look at it. Both commissions are working, trying to contribute to that effort. Staff's come back to us with some recommendations on how to prioritize. We're coming back to them with some other recommendations. So it's a challenging and complex process, but these two things really need to be integrated, and appreciate the effort that's been done so far to that.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ray Yep on Berkeley's Public Works Commission, and I'm also on the T1 subcommittee. We're at about the 2-year point of Measure T1, and at the beginning there was quite a bit of discussion with city staff and with certain council people about making this a model program, using the techniques that many cities and consultants use in running large capital infrastructure programs, including setting performance goals, having oversight, having a program manual, change management process, and all that. So I think my report here is that, like good fine wine, it takes time to prepare, and I think we're there. Since early this year, we're in the 2nd year, we've had some very productive discussions with Phil Harrington and Scott Ferris about kind of taking it to that level. And in that time, we've really come a long ways. We have had regular quarterly meetings with some of the staff in getting into some of the project details. I'd like to recognize that Elmer, Evelyn, and Nelson are here, and they're great to work with. And through this thing that Scott was talking about, the funding gap, we really had a collaborative effort on looking at how to do it, setting up criteria, developing a scorecard, and then ranking it and having the options that Scott wanted to just outline for you right now. But the details of that will be coming back to council very shortly. But as I said, it takes time to sort of gel as a team, and I think we're doing much better than before. And thank you so much for the staff.
Thank you very much, Ray. Thank you to Ray and Margot and members of the Public Works Commission for all your excellent work. We really value your input in this process. Any other public comment on this item? Any other public comment? Okay, thank you for your comments. So I'm going to suggest we start with Councilmember Harrison this time and just go down the dais. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you very much for the report. I did have a few specific questions and then one comment. One of my questions relates to some of the projects that were found to be infeasible, and it's a project detail, but it relates to the general idea of whether sustainability projects are feasible in general, and that is the King's School Park Green Infrastructure Project. I noticed you indicate it's not feasible. Is there something generally about this project, or is it about the site? Is it a site-specific problem, or are we looking at not being able to do some of the greening in our parks we were hoping for?
It's very site-specific on this particular project. Is we have a series of sycamore trees right where we're going to put the green infrastructure and the bioswale that are in the middle of their life, and we didn't want to remove them.
Okay, great. And again, this is a specific project question, but it's a citywide project, and that is the restroom needs assessment. I'm wondering what we're doing in terms of looking at alternative models for restrooms.
Yeah, in fact, that contract is coming before you next Tuesday. And we're really excited about that. We've got a great firm, and one of the issues, one of the scope items for them is looking at alternative restrooms. So they've done some really good analysis and actually production of alternative restrooms, and so we're anxious to see what they come up with for Berkeley.
Yeah, Great, thank you. And I noticed that throughout these plans is infused sustainability. It's interesting because it connects to our earlier conversation. The one thing I would just say from my perspective is I would probably not want to entertain reducing the energy savings at North Berkeley and at Live Oak. I notice we're talking about a cost comparison of making those changes versus what we might save over time. I don't think that's the only apposite comparison. We have to think about the planet. This is not just a cost-benefit analysis. It's a much bigger question. If we start down the road with our facilities that we're rebuilding and we don't put in these green features, I think we'll be not fulfilling what the public thought they were voting for. So it's a much more serious issue than just will we save as much as we spend. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent comment. Councilor Droste?
Thank you so much. I really want to thank you for the very thorough report, and I want to echo Councilmember Harrison's comments as well, especially in light of the climate action update that we just heard. I think it's really important that we focus on sustainability, and I know that's a mission of this council, but I'm very pleased to see many of these projects move forward, and your thoughtfulness in making sure that these projects are equitably distributed throughout the city. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wengraf.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I want to thank you for all the work on the Rose Garden. This is an iconic park for the city of Berkeley and extremely well used, and everybody is very excited about the work you're doing and the quality of the work that's being done, so I want to thank you. And for your willingness to work with the Friends of the Rose Garden to make improvements. They're very excited and they're doing really well raising money to help. The gap, the funding gap, I'm concerned that that gap is going to grow. And that we shouldn't be focused on 2.4, we should really maybe be focused on 5 or who knows what, but we know construction costs are going up, minimum 35%. And we don't, that's not something that we can control. So I'd like to see a really big contingency go into the costing, the pro formas for all of these projects. And it's going to cost us more, and we'll have to figure out where to get that money from, but I don't want to get focused on that 2.4 because that's just a snapshot in time now. But by the time we get around to those projects, I'm concerned it's going to be much larger. And that's just a reality, and I think the public needs to understand that. This is, we're at the mercy of the market. And it has nothing to do with you or Phil or the city manager or any of us. This is, this is happening everywhere in the state, and actually in the nation, because the president's tariff policies have also impacted the cost of construction. I think we have to be proactive and step up and basically say, we just need to expand our costs.
So along those lines, I was thinking exactly the same thing during the presentation. We had a series of fires in the state of California in 2017. As a result of the fires and the hurricanes, there was a significant construction cost escalation that we saw, which impacted certainly our projects as well as construction projects throughout the Bay Area. So my suggestion for your consideration is maybe we need to do a plan A and a plan B. A plan A is at this 2.4 million, a plan B is at a much higher assumed escalation, and think about what does that program look like in light of those two scenarios. I think that's worth consideration. I also just want to address one issue, which there was a story about this afternoon on Berkeley side, which is the paving plan. As was noted, due to construction cost escalation and when the bidding occurred, we were not able to proceed with paving projects this year. And I share the concern around that. Certainly our streets are we're doing a great job of trying to keep up with the condition of our streets, but clearly there's more that we can do. Thankfully, through the defeat of Proposition 6, there is, I think it's about $2 million, right, in assumed revenue on an annual basis that we will get to add to our paving budget. And one of the things that we might want to consider at a future point is whether we want to add to that paving budget. So we are going to proceed, just for members of the public and those in the listening audience who are watching, we are definitely proceeding with rebidding, and we are going to proceed with these projects. The money is there, and I think we know that we need to do everything we can to accelerate the level of paving in our community and implement complete streets projects as per our policy, which isn't just paving a street, but looking at how we, opportunities for green infrastructure, opportunities for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure as well. So I just wanted to address that because that was a timely issue that's certainly been discussed. We are definitely proceeding. Thankfully, there are more resources that are available through county transportation sales tax revenue, through the new SB1 funding, and through a significant investment we made through Measure T1, $5 million in funding for, in addition to the budget that we had allocated. So we'll be considering the paving plan on Tuesday. Councilor Hahn.
Thank you. This is obviously something that you know, but it is something that is of concern to me, which is that the 3 phases that were originally imagined for T1 projects, when the projects were put forward, they were not in order of importance. It wasn't that phase 1 projects are the really important ones and phase 2 are less important. The phasing was based on other things like feasibility or timing or whatever. So it may be that, the most important project of the city is in phase 3. And my worry is that as we go over our expected costs for the phase 1 projects, will we end up in a situation where something really important that was in phase 3, we don't have the money for it? And I just want to make sure that as you're thinking about how we prioritize, I'm almost wondering sometimes if we shouldn't think about it in 3 phases. But that's my concern, that our prioritization not put something really important at the end that then doesn't get done. So, I'm sure you're aware of it, but I just wanted to highlight that as something that I'm quite concerned about. Another question, quite a while ago, I'm terrible with time memory, I think it was over a year ago, I had 2 different items, one about RFPs for city projects having language about universal design, and then another one about at least attempting to follow the ideas that are in Berkeley Deep Green Building. And I wanted to know if those have made it into our RFPs. They were supposed to be integrated.
The short answer is yes. We have taken into consideration universal design. So for our facilities project, essentially everything that we've implemented or touched within the facility should meet those, universal design standards. So we're moving forward with that. With other deep green infrastructure improvements, we have elements of that in some of our facilities projects, such as the North Berkeley Senior Center. Of course, talking about funding, the way we have the bid structured, it's a bid alternate. So based on what our bids come in, we'll see if we can move forward with some of these improvements, such as solar. However, what I'd like to let the council know is that if by chance costs come in that we can't afford solar for this particular phase, we have the infrastructure to implement it later on.
Just a quick correction. So they're not necessarily in our RFPs, but they've ended up in our scopes of work. So as we've bid the projects out, we come back, we're talking about with our designers what needs to go, and those elements have ended up in our scopes of work.
Okay, I would love seeing what that standard language looks like that reflects the 2 referrals that were sent by council, just so that I can see what we are asking, because I think the main concern, I love that they're being maybe even more actively integrated into our planning, but I think my main concern, among others, was that we hire firms that have familiarity with these things up front, because it's much less expensive to integrate them into a project than to try to, sort of just drop them in at the end. And I wanted to make sure that when we're considering engineers and architects and other firms, that they actually have those competencies and it's not an add-on for them. So I would love to see if you could just send me 1 or 2 scopes of work so I can see how it looks in the document. That would be great. My next point or question is about the Civic Center scope, or whatever we're calling it, the study that is being done. At one time, there was a little question about how the LPC and historic preservation were going to be integrated into that effort. I wonder if you could speak to that.
I can tell you that we've been, meeting on that process, but it hasn't started yet. So, but landmarks will be a huge part of that, given that those both buildings and the park is landmarked.
Okay, great. And my last question is North Berkeley Senior Center. I love that we are galloping ahead with that, but now that we have money for affordable housing, should we not take a second look at that site and consider doing an integrated project that includes affordable housing at the same time? That's a question.
That's a question. I can't answer that question.
Not a rhetorical question. I know, I hate to sort of throw any brakes on something that is clearly ready to go, but the opportunity is so incredible and the need is so great, and now we should have the money that I don't even know the scope of what you're doing, the full scope. I don't remember it at North Berkeley, but
we do have a FEMA grant there that has a time expiration date on it. And although we did get an extension, it's not for multiple years, so it would have to be an issue.
Did we not decide to build it such that we could build on top of it? I just want to make sure that, it seems to me this is a likely location that we will look at for affordable housing, although I don't know. They may have other plans.
You know what?
But I want to make sure that as we do this, we're not closing the door now that we have money for affordable housing.
Elmar, you want to come to the mic?
I'll just say before Elmar comes up, if I may, that West Berkeley is a more appropriate location to move more quickly with a project for affordable housing, and I think that's part of the analysis that we're going to be doing for West Berkeley Service Center. And I hope at some point in the spring we'll come forward. I'm going to come forward with an item to look at an RFP, doing an RFP for potential housing development there. Madam City Manager, and then we'll go to Elmar.
So when we just comment on West Berkeley, we do have $150,000, and we are in the process of, working with an architect to enter into a contract to help with that design, and that'll include a discussion of.
But we have to make the decision about: do we just go in the direction of housing, or do we wait and do some sort of other renovation of that location? Madam City Manager, and then Mr. Kapler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to encourage us to be really cognizant of the bond requirements, which require 85% of completion of spending of the funding within the first 3 years and 100% in 5. So whatever we delay or how we move forward, we have to keep those spending guidelines in mind.
All right, yeah. So your question with regard to a housing or a second floor, so the structural analysis that we did, or the structural upgrades that we're doing, are such that you can add another floor in the future. One. Just one. Yeah. Just one. And that's part of the design.
Is there a reason why we couldn't do structural upgrades that allow us to add more than one?
Yes. There's a bar tunnel that runs right there.
So what's the question?
I was asking, but it sounds like perhaps Councilmember Wendergraff has an answer, but
Councilor Wengraff had mentioned that there's a BART tunnel, so that's a unique site
Yeah,
constraint.
So we can't have a bigger load on that building?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, well then despite being an ideal location from other perspectives for affordable housing, it sounds like it may not end up being so, but that would be a real shame, but I understand. I just want to make sure we don't miss any opportunity, that's all. Thank you. Those were all my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Davila.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if in phase 1, if something's not complete, can that happen in phase 2 or 3?
Definitely.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then also, I was wondering, because we have this African American Resource Center that's supposed to be happening at some point in time, if it's possible to, it seems like synergistic for that to be part of the San Pablo Park Plan, since it's District 2 and 3 are mostly where the African American community and the history is, and it would be an opportune time to incorporate some of those either in that plan or because I guess part of that the African American Resource Center was a swimming pool, a gym, a dance classroom, photography, and all those things, which would, address some of the outcomes that are happening at the park, or or with the youth in Berkeley, and deal with those things. So I was hoping that some of those things can be looked at when you're taking this $750,000 to come up with the plan and design. And then also, the streets, definitely. I'm getting tired of doing this all the time, every time, especially when I'm on my bike. It's like really annoying. I can handle it in the car, but on my bike, it's really problematic. And so many people are still so seriously upset about 6th Street not getting addressed this year, and hopefully that'll be addressed in summer 2019 as promised. The toilets, the citywide restrooms, like how many are you thinking about throughout the city? I guess we'll learn that on Tuesday, but if you have an answer now, that would be good.
So the study is an analysis of what's existing and then a community process developing a plan about where other public restrooms should be. And so that is yet to be determined.
Yeah, I would just, well, I've lived next to a liquor store, which is probably going to get demolished now, but anyway, it would be nice if they could be kind of near like stores where people, I see people always, especially men, going to the restroom when they pull up to these stores. So I don't know, I'm just saying that might be a thought. And let's see, what other questions? I think that was about it. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments from the council members? Anything else staff would like to add? I guess we'll go to Councilor Davila, and then if there's anything you'd like to add before we close. Councilor Davila.
Yeah, I just, solar is so important right now, and that'll get us closer to our goals. So I just wanted to plug that because that should be in every city building and in every new construction and everything that we do. Just saying, thank you.
Along those lines, I guess a follow-up question is our green building policy still that we're LEED silver? Okay, I'd like to, I really want us to take another look at that, and maybe that's an item we need to bring forward because we require LEED Gold for downtown construction, we should at least have LEED Gold for our, I know that the library was a LEED Platinum building. I know that we're, to the extent possible, we're trying as much as we can to reach a much, much higher standard, but going back to the previous presentation, you know, what we build, you know, the energy usage that's created is one of the contributors to our GHGs, and so the more we can move towards Z&E, the more we're going to have an impact. So that's just a comment. I know the policy is the policy, but if we want to, we may want to look at updating the policy. Anything else staff wants to add before we close?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for all your work. We very much appreciate it. And thank you to the voters of Berkeley for your support of this bond measure. So let's now go to, we still have a quorum, the next item, the last item, which is the update on the Berkeley strategic plan. And staff from the city manager's office, I believe, will be joining us on that. Do the colleagues want to take a brief break? Let's take a 5-minute recess and we'll be back.
Oh yeah, we haven't had one since 4 o'clock.
It will. It will. It's not on. Oh, yeah, yes, 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 yes. Yeah.
back in session.
So we're now going to move to item 3. This is an update on the Berkeley strategic plan. And waiting for one more council member to have a quorum. But we can just start anyways with the presentations, and I want to turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Dee Williams-Ridley, your city manager. Here with me this evening is Melissa McDonough, our IT director, Savita Chaudhry, our IT director, our planning director, Timothy Burrows, and our captain from the police department, Jen Lewis. Also in the audience is hopefully behind me, and I'm not going to turn around, but I'm hoping they're back there, our entire executive team. Raise your hand if our executive team is in the audience. They are. And some of our managers and specific folks that help us in the subject matter expert area of the strategic plan implementation. This evening, Melissa and I will be presenting along with the other with the 3 department heads here at the table and our captain, and we hope to answer any questions that you have about the strategic plan. I want to give a little simple quote. Good business leaders create a vision. They articulate the vision, they passionately own the vision, and relentlessly drive it to completion. The latter part is all of you. Relentlessly drive it to completion, and that is exactly what we should be doing as a collaborative team. Next page. So most of you have handouts in front of you that list out some of the major high-level highlights of the strategic plan, which is what we'll be presenting this evening, are highlights at a very high level for both the council and the audience. There are details in the attachments to the agenda report. I want to say here tonight that we have made progress in every area and in every department. We've made the most progress in improving efficiency, our financial health, our economic health, and our customer service. So some of our team up here will be sharing some of those great efforts and talking a little bit about how we move forward and advance. Our objectives this evening are to provide you here in this work session an update on the progress we've made on implementing the strategic plan. And I'm excited that we'll be sharing with you this evening a small, very small example of our success in terms of completed projects. Your vision and the support of the strategic plan has helped us to become better. It has helped us to focus our efforts and make progress on the things that matter most to the Berkeley community. That vision and support will be crucial again as we look to the next budget cycle to identify the next set of priorities. But tonight, let's pause for a minute and really take a look at some of the great things that we've done. We will give you a peek at what will be coming up in the new year, both activities we'll be doing and opportunities for the council and public input. So where did we start? Most big plans come with a vision, and I think we've all shared that vision. It took 3 years of collaboration and input from hundreds of staff, the community commission, and the council. As you recall, through the Berkeley Considers, over 700 community members gave feedback on the strategic plan goals, and you, City Council, graciously spent time in multiple work sessions and a retreat, diving deep into the strategic plan, providing recommendations and refinements. Over the past year, we've guided our work by the 9 long-term goals you adopted in January by focusing on the key priorities supporting those goals. Our strategic plan priorities reflect a variety of things: referrals, infrastructure, improvements, but many things are just not captured in those priorities, like a house viewed from the outside there. The working operations of the city are also not always seen. Park maintenance, homeless services, invoicing, issuing business licenses, reviewing permit applications, public safety, managing job openings, those smaller things you don't necessarily see. The strategic plan priorities renew, they innovate, strengthen, and support these unseen portions of our operations, our baseline services. The priorities are critical, highly visible, and often responsive to immediate concerns or long-term needs. And I can't see that part. The strategic plan provides a guide for building a foundation that will serve to sustain and improve the city and its services now and in the future. It helps ensure staff prioritize time and resources and on things that matter to the Berkeley community. I'll keep drilling home things that matter to the Berkeley community because we are focusing on those specific priorities that the council has specifically asked for our staff to work on. Our role and our goal is to implement those priorities for each of you. I'm going to turn it over now to Melissa to talk a little bit more about our progress. Melissa, thank you.
As Dee mentioned, the strategic plan identifies 9 goals for the organization. These are aspirational and long-term. These goals help us to align our work with the community's values. They touch on affordable housing, racial and social equity, environmental justice, as well as service improvement, infrastructure, and resilience. For each of these goals, there are many priorities. Priorities are simply phases or projects that can be completed within a given 2-year budget cycle and that help advance progress on one of our goals. Some of the 116 priorities that were identified are actually large, complex items consisting of many interrelated projects. For example, the Digital Strategic Plan, which is one of our priorities, consists of over 150 projects. I'm happy to report that just shy of 1 year after adoption, 86% of our projects are either complete or underway. Many of the projects included as strategic plan priorities were projects that started at the beginning of the budget cycle back in 2017. Some of them will continue on to the completion of this budget cycle in 2019. If you're interested in seeing the status of an individual project, all 305 projects are in the attachment to your staff report. I'm sure you'll be relieved to learn that we will not be going into that level of detail right now. I'd like to hand it over to our IT director to instead highlight some of our notable IT projects.
Thank you, Melissa. So I want to start off with, as Department of IT, we have completed over 40 projects in the last fiscal year, and it helped every department in the delivery of services. We may be talking about only a few today, but we'll be coming back to the council with an information report in late January, early February with all of the details on other projects. So some of the ones I want to start off with are the projects which helped us improve a lot of internal efficiencies, such as we implemented a new CAD 911 system, not a new system by itself, but we upgraded the existing system to the newest version, which helps us improve efficiencies in responding to the 911 calls. As Melissa mentioned, we deployed SNOW or ServiceNow as an enterprise project portfolio management tool. We have successfully deployed the phase 1A is what we're calling for our core financial system, which includes some of the basic functions of accounts payable, projects, and contract management. We still have accounts receivable, general billing, and HR payroll to be done as phase 2. Last but not the least, the body-worn cameras is another big project that we have completed. The website redesign project, the RFP proposals are completed. The council had approved the contract with the vendor, and we are in the contract negotiations with the vendor at this time. Moving on to the next slide. These are some of the projects that have improved our access to the information for our community and help improve their customer service. As of today, we have over 13 city locations where we've expanded the Wi-Fi access points, and they are not only available to the city employees, but also as a guest Wi-Fi for the public. Records Online is another tool which helps our community members to search information on our contracts, all the information that City Clerk's office puts on the website. Building Eye is another portal which helps our community look up for the information on building and land use permit activity, and it goes all the way back to 2000. With this information, I'll hand it off back to Melissa.
Thank you, Savita. Recently, as Savita was talking about, we loaded all of our strategic plan priorities into ServiceNow, which we call SNOW. And this tool allows our departments to provide project information in a central shared database, which has helped us to develop a common template and language for project management throughout the city and track our progress on completing these priorities. The original set of strategic plan priorities were adopted mid-cycle, mid-budget cycle. So what that means, it's already time to start drafting the next set of priorities. This process will include both reviewing unfinished projects from the previous cycle and identifying new ones. We will be seeking City Council vision and input on these priorities for the next budget cycle at a retreat in the new year. Besides looking at project metrics, we're very excited to also begin looking at performance measures. We're using a framework for this known as results-based accountability, which at its essence boils down to 3 basic questions. How much are we doing? How well are we doing it? Is anyone better off? We started by piloting this in 2 departments, planning and police. We are just getting started. This is a work in progress, but we wanted to let you know where we're heading. Captain Jen Lewis can tell you a little bit about the police department's pilot, and then Director Timothy Burrows of the planning department will speak on the planning portion.
Good evening. Hi. We've been exploring the use of results-based accountability as a method to inform what we're doing. And the piece that we're looking at is building community trust and the ways that we engage the community and how we can make meaningful inroads in building trust with our community. And we've identified that both community engagement and quality of service is what's going to drive building that trust. And there's a couple things that we looked at, and we wanted to look at things that were more quantitative, things that we could count and really wrap our heads around and look at data. And that involved looking at commendations. How often did the community reach out to us and commend the work that we were doing? And complaints. How often were they unhappy with the service that we gave? We also thought it was really important to talk about engagement in ways that were more qualitative. And those were the ways that we connect with our community outside of calls for service. And that's things like having coffee with a cop, barbershop forum, being present at fairs and health fairs and festivals, and being a voice out in the community to talk to people and get to know people on a more intimate level.
As you all have heard me say, and as you know, our #1 goal in planning is to improve the clarity, the consistency, and the efficiency of the permit process. And we've set a lot of that work in motion over the past year, including new and improved permit submittal checklists and guides, creating a more welcoming environment in our PSC through open houses and other events, launching new technologies like the one that Savita mentioned, amending and reorganizing our zoning ordinance, and other work that we're doing. So we're proud of the accomplishments, but we also know we have a lot more work to do, and we need to be able to track and monitor our progress over time in order to understand how we're doing and what else we should be doing to continually improve that process. So we've identified a couple of performance metrics that we're just beginning to collect data for that will help tell that story and help us make continuous improvement. So one of the things we're doing is launching a customer service survey. That survey is now done and ready to launch. We'll likely put it out to our customers, so to speak, our community members, starting in January, which will give us data on their experience through the permit process. We are also going to clarify our milestones, our targets for turnaround times for all permit types, building permits and use permits, and the steps along the way, so there's transparency and accountability there that we can measure and report on over time. And we're launching a new software program in the Permit Service Center that will also allow us to quantify wait times in the Permit Center and look at trends and see how we can reduce those times in the Permit Center.
So where are we going with all of this? Once we've completed our pilot with planning and police, we want to develop performance measures with every single department in the city. Early next year, we'll be conducting a biannual community survey. It will be our first ever biannual survey to inform this work and develop baseline data from the community. Ultimately, once we have established citywide performance measures and collected this baseline data, we will research and then seek council approval for a public-facing dashboard. A dashboard will allow us to regularly and transparently communicate our progress and performance to the community. Dee?
Thank you, Melissa. Again, I'd like to thank you, Council, and our department heads and this team of folks. It's been an amazing journey that we've pursued around setting up a strategic plan. Walking in the door 3 years ago, the first thing that I think I may have mentioned to all of you, we have got to figure out how to prioritize, focus, and pull together a vision for our organization so that people have an idea of what they're doing and why they're doing it. We need people to come to work every day wanting to put their best foot forward and give 100% to our organization, to each other, and to the Berkeley community. So I just want to thank our team of staff members and all of you, because it has been a journey, and I am very grateful for the leadership and the support. It's been a really, really big challenge, but we will continue to push hard, to push forward, and to embrace the ideas and the innovative projects and policies that Council wants to put forward. Please stay tuned. We'll be contacting you in the spring about a retreat for visioning and identifying what we hope to accomplish during the budget cycle coming up. We also hope you will help us to spread the word. When we launch the community survey. We'll be reaching out to each of you to reach out to your constituents to make sure that we get as much information and data so that we can start setting up baselines on community and customer service for our city. So thank you, and we are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest we go to public comment on this item, and then we'll then bring it back to the council for discussion. Is there any public comment on item 3, the update on the Berkeley Strategic Plan?
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and staff, it's really exciting to hear about this strategic plan and the progress being made. I have worked over 40 years, partially for the private sector for a very large engineering company, and also for a public agency, the Santa Clara Valley Water District. Through that effort, I've been through Malcolm Baldrige Quality Improvement Program, ISO certification, TQM, and you name it, the many flavors of the day on making performance improvements. I hear a new one today called results-based accountability. Sounds good, but again, to me, it sounds like maybe another flavor of the day. So through my over 40 years, I've learned that one concept presented by the quality guru, Deming, probably works the best. It's not sexy. It doesn't have a nice sounding word to it, but it's called plan, do, check, act. And so what it means is plan what you're going to do, implement it, monitor its performance, learn from it, and do it better the next time around. So on an annual basis, it works. It's a continuous improvement process, and it's doing a lot of the same things you're talking about, but I'm not so much in favor of like fancy words or things. I'm in favor of a continuous improvement process, like what Deming says: plan, do, check, act.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment on this item? Is there any other public comment? Okay, thank you for your comments. I'm just going to kick off the discussion, then I'm going to start with Councilor Davila this time. So I just want to thank the city manager for, first of all, making it a priority to implement a strategic plan for the city of Berkeley. When she came into office, she said that Berkeley needs a vision, a roadmap for how we're going to deliver services and move new initiatives forward. And I want to thank her for her leadership and all of her staff, all the department heads. And I want to particularly recognize the work the police department's been doing. Thank you, Captain Lewis, for being here. And the planning department two very important departments in our city that engage with people on a daily basis. And I often hear from my constituents that they very much appreciate the excellent service our police are providing, and that they are more happier with the service the planning department's providing. And I think that's a testament to Tim Burrows' vision and his commitment to really making customer service and improving our permitting process a priority. So I want to just touch upon a few points. One, the city manager and I have been talking about the next phase of the strategic plan. So as we develop the strategic plan for the next biennial budget process, we need to look at what has been completed, what hasn't been completed. But I think we also might want to take another look at the goals. Are these the same goals and priorities that we need to prioritize in 2019 and 2020? Are there modifications to them? I will acknowledge that we have a new council coming in, including 2 new council members, and so it's important that they provide their input to us as we engage in this process. And so to that end, I've suggested to the city manager that we should, in the early part of 2019, have a special meeting to specifically focus on looking at our strategic plan and focus on visioning and priority setting for the city government. We're constrained by the Brown Act to have that conversation, but I think we have a lot of commonality as a city council. We hear the same issues from our constituents, whether they be in District 6 or maybe in District 2. And so I think we need to have a big picture, high-level conversation around how are we doing, what are our needs, and what do we want to prioritize as a council, and use that as a framework for the work, hopefully, that we'll be doing in the coming year. As we are moving in a new legislative process, hopefully with the establishment of policy committees, I really want us to really look at when we are developing legislation and also when we are evaluating legislation to look at how does it align with the goals of the strategic plan. And I know that we talked about including a requirement for reports to include how this aligns with the goals of the strategic plan. I hope we will be implementing that in the coming year. So I just want to call to the council's attention that in the spring we will be having this retreat, this visioning discussion, and I'm excited. I think it is going to be very beneficial because I think we have a lot of commonality as a council. RRV also feeds into this as well, the things that we have prioritized, and so we need to consider that as well. And I want to touch upon something that Ray Yepit mentioned, which is I'm glad that each department is looking at a performance-based sort of methodology, and I think we have the big goals, and I think we need to think about how do we break that down to an actual quantifiable metric. So I know PCI, that's the way to measure things. How many people are we sheltering? How many units of affordable housing do we have? How many 311 calls? I mean, I think getting that granular so we can actually track how efficient and how effective we are in delivering services and how we are delivering new programs is, I think, beneficial to us, beneficial to the city manager, and beneficial to the community. And so I know we're moving that direction, but I want to just really strongly emphasize, to the extent we can, really get granular and have real metrics by which we can evaluate the effectiveness of the work that we're doing, because that's input to us as policymakers about funding and about policies and a way to prioritize or modify policies, and it's input to you as administrators in terms of how we can better deliver services. As closing, I want to say that the customer survey is really exciting. I think it's really important that we get input on a 2-year basis from our residents. We do these surveys when we are discussing ballot measures, but it's very high level, and I think we want to get real concrete information, and that will help us as well in the visioning process. Do you envision, Madam City Manager, that we'll have the results of that survey in time for our retreat? Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't commit that we would have the results from that survey by that time. We may just have the survey developed early March, so okay. I can't commit to. And
then as we are developing that survey, I think we would all greatly appreciate talking with you because we may have suggestions around that. And then when we have this retreat, and we'll obviously have a more focused conversation around this, I think we need to get an analysis of where are we at with the strategic plan, so we can evaluate what's been done, what's in the queue, what haven't we started, how to, so granular information so we can have that when we're evaluating these things. But I'm excited. I think this is great, but we need to also make sure that while we are tracking the progress, that the policy that we're bringing to the City Council aligns with the strategic plan. And I just want to say that there is a finite capacity that we have to implement all these different things, and just something that we need to be mindful of. We want to make sure that while we want to consider new ideas and new policies and new programs, we also need to make sure that our staff have the bandwidth to complete the projects that we have referred.
Attached in your agenda report are a huge list of our projects, and it kind of at the end of that document you can see what's been completed and what work is in progress and what work hasn't started yet. And we'll keep updating that because that is at a very high level, but it does give you the project title. That is a good start for a council to kind of take a look at that document to make sure that you're seeing your projects on there for one, but of course to also get familiar.
Thank you. Councilmember Davila.
Thank you for the report. I would like to see climate emergency focus as a high priority in the strategic plan when we go forward. I would really like to see a customer relations management CRM for council put into some, so that we all have that, because that's something that we're lacking right now, and we could totally, I don't know, some of us might have it, but I know my office doesn't, and it would be nice to support us in that way. And I also would like to stop having the council, I know we're separate, but we need to be more whole, like you say, one city, that whole, whatever that thing is that you say, one team, one city. But I kind of feel like council is not always part of that team in a way. I just would like to see us more cohesive and not a separate silo. The RRV process, something that I kind of really would like to look at differently. Because I feel like once it goes into that hole, it's there for who knows how long. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't like to put things towards our RV because then it doesn't seem like it ever comes out. But it's only been 2 years, so maybe that's not true, but it's just something that I like to see if we could look at differently. But other than that, thank you very much for the report.
Councilmember Hahn.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing your vision and the vision of a vision to Berkeley, and congratulations to all the departments that are doing so much. I did a rough count of the number of items in the attachment, and it's around 300. So it comes out to one major project per every 4 employees in the city. So I think it's very ambitious. Of course, it doesn't fall out that way. There's probably a lot of people who have a lot of projects and others who may have less. But I just wanted to point that out. I just think it's a very daunting just to look at it. And I know you guys look at it all the time. So I just want to acknowledge that you're obviously undertaking a huge number of initiatives. I have a little question about timing of things, which the points that the mayor raised about looking at our goals again, especially in light of the fact that we have new council members. I've only been involved with strategic plans in not public agencies that aren't run by a public board. And in those agencies, there's usually a timeline for reviewing things, like the mission we review every 6 years, and the goals we review every 3, and the strategies we review every year, and the progress we review every 6 months. There's usually a set idea, in part because it's hard to keep changing those things all the time. The whole point of the high-level stuff is for it to be static. But I think the point the mayor makes is very important. As a public agency, I don't think we should be that static. And I think that creates, well, in the sense that we do have new people, they are elected, they're coming in, we have to make room for them to contribute to this. Now, my guess is that in our case, we won't come up with things wildly different, probably similar emphasis areas, maybe a little different take on things. But I thought maybe you could speak a little bit to your idea of how, what level strategic planning work we would be doing in what increments, and then the tension of being a public board and the need to maybe review things more often than strategic planning really likes. So if you could speak a little bit to that.
Absolutely. Thank you. What I would like to say is when we ventured down this road, we talked about using our 2-year budget cycle because we wanted to put forward work that we knew we could complete, that was budgeted and aligned with council's goals and priorities. So we have a 2-year budget cycle for the initiatives, the work, the new projects and programs. But on a 5-year basis, we should be coming back to look at how our projects, our goals, and/or our vision is stated. And the reason for that is that a lot of information, a lot of resource and money and effort and council visioning goes into building out those high-level goals that should be so lofty that pretty much anything that you wanted to change could fit within them. Now, a mission statement, however, takes a lot of effort to change and revise, and it's really difficult. I wouldn't recommend that we change a mission statement every year or every 2 years or every change of a council. I would recommend we change a mission statement, or at least look at it, perhaps every 5 to 10 years, somewhere in a 10-year margin. The goals that you've already created, those 9 lofty goals, they are at a very, very high level. And pretty much everything that we're doing here as a city and that you are looking towards the future of doing fits within those somewhere. That doesn't mean you can't tweak them or change them. It doesn't mean that. It means you have a lot of documents and resources that are out there exhibiting your goals, and they're already labeled, so you've done a lot of messaging around these high-level goals. And I would recommend that you stay within them for at least 5 years, but you certainly have the ability to change whatever you think you need to.
I think it would be helpful to have, for you to publish sort of a cycle so that we know. And I wonder with 5 years, is it better with an agency that turns, where the leadership turns every 2 years? Is it better to say 6 or 4? I think it would be good, because we have all these things that sound similar, a mission and goals, they sound similar, to really, if you could show us the hierarchy and how different things fit in and what your expectations are as an organizational leader, as a CEO essentially, of how often each level would be reviewed, and then also taking into account the fact that we are a public board, we have new people being elected and coming and going, and we have a different set of obligations to the public that might intersect. I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Wingrove.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. So looking at these 9 goals, I would say we're doing very well in terms of achieving our goals. It really feels good to me. The one thing that I'm concerned about, and I've actually had a discussion with Ray Yep about this, is we're not very good at promoting our successful projects. And we have so many projects that we've completed in the past year that we should be really proud of and really letting our citizenry know about. And I'm thinking about the stairs project, the parking garage, the BART Plaza. I mean, there are probably many more, but those are very visible, relatively visible, certainly the parking garage and BART Plaza projects. And we need to tout our horn a little better. So that's one suggestion I have, is that we up the ante a little bit on the promotion when we're successful. And we have been, come on. We have been very successful. And I also think that that will go a long way for staff morale, because our staff are really committed and they really do a wonderful job, and the public needs to know that. My second concern is, I know from my own experience, if I have 25 things on my list that I have to get done, it's crazy making. You know, sometimes I don't even know where to begin. And I'm very concerned about staff overload, where we're really stretched thin, and I'm more concerned with quality than I am with quantity, because I want everything that we do to be done really well. And maybe I have standards that are too high, I don't know. But I think we can all agree that we want really good work to be done, and I think we have to be very careful about stressing out and stretching thin our staff. So I would like to make a plea to my council colleagues to take their right foot off the gas pedal and take into consideration every time we make a referral, it's going to end up on somebody's desk to be done at some point. And just to sort of look at the big picture, I think the strategic plan will help us with that. I hope it will help to focus our work as a council. And so my thanks to all of you who are here tonight and all of the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
I was going to say committees, I think will help us too.
Absolutely.
Councilman Drost.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. It's really impressive, and I know, Madam City Manager, when you first came to the city, you said this is a really important priority of yours, and it's an important priority for, I think, this entire council, and how we can really focus on our priorities and moving things forward in an expeditious way. I just quickly would like to say the Coffee with a Cop has been tremendously successful and has really built community, and I've heard nothing but good things about it. So that's been a terrific development, and all the amazing accomplishments, particularly with the body-worn cameras. It's really exciting. And Timothy, the planning department, you're making great strides, and I know that you've taken on a lot, and I know that I hear a lot about planning. I'm sure you probably hear even more, and I feel that we are really headed in the right direction under your leadership. And Savita, I have heard that you're just the rock star of the IT world, and I just really want to thank you for all the work that you've done. And Melissa, this has been really tremendous, your report here tonight. And I often, when we talk about the strategic plan, I know I talk a lot about outputs and outcomes and logic models, and I know that we're in very good hands with you and strategic plan, and I just want to thank you for all your work and your outreach to council members. And of course, Dee, you have really been a tremendous leader in all of this. So moving on to the strategic plan, I have a few suggestions, and I just really want to thank the mayor for moving forward on these policy subcommittees. I really think this is really going to help with efficiency.
Hopefully Tuesday.
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, the suggestion of the policy subcommittees, and that may or may not pass. I think it will. And looking at how can we meet our goals as a city. So a few things that I'm considering that I think might be helpful is one, to look at our commissions and how they might augment these policy subcommittees. So in looking at, if we do in fact pass these policy subcommittees in those 6 areas, perhaps we have an opportunity to say, okay, let's pick 2 to 4 commissions that might support each of those policy subcommittees. And that could help us get independent voice to these subcommittees and also really streamline our outcomes. So I think having, looking at our commissions directly related to the policy committees, which we know will be directly related to our strategic plan, would be really helpful. Now, that might require making some tough decisions about our commissions, and I just fully want to emphasize that we want to open our arms to our commissions and having that independent voice. So I think that would be really helpful to look at, because I know that some departments are overweighted with commissions, and really looking at that structure. Another thing that I think will help is spreading out those deadlines for council referrals. Now, I know that, and I'm not particularly wedded to the RRV process, but what I am feeling right now is that that process is sort of being undone, and we're getting back into the initial problem that we had. And the reason for that is because we want to see things, because we aspire to see things completed quickly, and we request short-term referral that may or may not be possible. We're forgetting that our city staff is ultimately the determining factor in whether that can come back to us in 90 days. I would love to be able to tell you to complete my referral in 90 days, but that is often not the case. So then what happens is we're stacking them up, and then it's hard to prioritize all of these short-term referrals because they're all getting backed up. They can't be completed in 90 days, and then we're back to square one, which is the reason why we put in the reweighted range voting process. So just really trying to be cognizant of that. I think those deadlines will help with the policy subcommittee, because that sort of in some ways really allows us to focus on what we want to put forward three or 4 times a year. So I think that'll help. But just being cognizant of that is really important, because we all want to see these outcomes outlined in the strategic plan. So how do we get there? So I think that would help in making sure that we understand how hard our staff is working, and looking at the hundreds of items that we refer to you, and how many you all have completed. That is really, really quite tremendous. So I'll leave it at that, but the main thing I would say is looking at our commission structure, and this will be an ongoing conversation, really thanking you for all of your work. And also jumping off from what Councilmember Wengraf said is, while it is true, I do believe that we should self-promote, I am part of that as well. So your emails to us have been really helpful about giving us regular updates so we can put it into our newsletters. So I also want to acknowledge that we want to help you as well. So especially if you want to highlight a particular accomplishment, I'm more than happy to put it in my newsletter so we can let the public know about the good work that our city's doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the council? Okay, thank you. Madam City Manager, anything before we close?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to close by acknowledging a lot of the work that's happened with the staff. Timothy Burrows really kicked this off with us and making sure that our strategic plan got its full force behind it, he and I together, and the entire city, and all of you, of course. And then now that I have Melissa McDonough sitting at the helm helping with the implementation, I really want to recognize her efforts. She's bringing forth a very crisp, modernized approach to how we see and live the strategic plan. So I'm very appreciative of her work, and I just want to make sure I acknowledge her. And last but not least, of course, our Acting Deputy City Manager Paul Budenhagen. He is a major support to our leadership team and to all of us here. So I just want to recognize them. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I think that completes the business before the council this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Droste, seconded by Wengraf. Any objection to the motion? Hearing no objection, we're adjourned.